Welcome to Late Night Story. When the world goes silent and shadows stretch longer, some stories awaken, whispered only to those still awake. So put on your headphones, turn down the lights, and let me guide you through the quiet hours. If you're listening alone, you're exactly where you need to be. If everyone can leave a comment to let me know where you are listening from in the world, don't forget to subscribe before you drift too far into the dark.
Of Night and Day, Chapter 1. In the dark vastness of space, there existed a bright yellow sun. Orbiting the sun, past a lifeless world scorched by the raw heat of this vivid yellow star, lay two worlds that the sun smiled upon. The first world, Day, was inhabited by creatures known as the Dei Angels. These creatures were quite humanoid, sans their large feathery wings. A Dei's hair and feathers often shared the same color. The more common Dei colors were yellow, blue, green, brown, black, red, and in some cases, a dull white. A lesser race of more compact, slightly humanoid creatures also lived alongside the Dei Angels. They were stout, hard-skinned, and beady-eyed creatures with short horns and sharp teeth. These were known as the Dei Imps. The Imps lacked the poise and intellect of the Angels, but were included in Angel society, employed mostly as manual laborers, house servants, and messengers. This dynamic gave the Angels a sense of charity and goodwill, as the poor Imps would surely not be able to provide for themselves if not for their gracious inclusion into Angel society. The paying jobs offered them allowed them to feed, clothe, and house their families, and even have some entertainment every so often. The Imps, in turn, were seemingly content with this arrangement. "It's better than being enslaved," was a common joke often told amongst themselves, usually said in a tavern whenever a fellow Imp invariably started complaining about his job after several pints. The Angels were pleased that the Imps liked to stick together, and helped the Imps carve out sections of the towns and cities that were strictly devoted to their kind for living and socializing. Dei's land was nearly effortless to develop, with its large swathes of flat plains and plentiful waterways, serving to easily enable trade and transportation. With few predators to threaten the Dei, organized society spread in both massive and tiny settlements alike, all across the Great Lands. These societies soon rose high into the sky as they became overpopulated metropolitan areas, connected by great roadways, rails, and rivers. The Dees took full advantage of the plenty of their world. Yet, needing far more to support the needs and wants of their growing population, the smartest of the Angels perfected methods to enable them to reach outside of their home planet to gather additional resources. The second world that held sentient life was called Night. Night was inhabited by far different intelligent creatures. These beings were known as the Dragons of Night. Their very first difference was their digitigrade legs. Because of this, they were almost about 60 centimeters taller on average than Dei Angel. Rather than a soft mammalian skin, they had a smooth, scaly hide. While the Dragons of Night also had wings, they were fleshy as opposed to feathery. The Night had large tails that aided them in flight and balance. The dragons were built to hunt and kill, and as such, they possessed razor-sharp teeth. Black claws tipped their fingers and toes. The last noticeable difference was their slit, reflective eyes. They could see excellently in the dark, and their night vision had also evolved to see a great distance to stalk their prey. Unlike the Dei, the Night evolved in areas of scarce food supply and little advantage in their world. Night was heavily populated with a variety of massive lizards. Some were so large they shook the ground as they walked, and their roars resonated through the air like jet engines. There were smaller species of these great lizards, but even the reptiles that stood at only 1.5 to 2 meters were not necessarily less threatening. To compensate for their size, the angel-sized predatory bipedal lizards learned to convene in vicious packs capable of killing several night dragons before they could even take flight. Due to this threat, the Night developed a distinct trait, the ability to sense their fellow nearby Night's emotional state. Thanks to this empathic link, an individual Night could silently warn others of nearby dangers without having to also alert predators to their location. Knitting empathy even aided in identifying injured or ill Night. Over time, this ability strengthened into not only sensing others' emotions, but actually experiencing them as well in some cases. This bonding ability produced the Knight's most effective and revered social staple, the hunting party. The hunting parties consisted of a single pair of Knight each, a hunter and a carrier. Their task was to hunt the dangerous lizards needed for everyone's meat and thus survival. The hunter's role was tracking, stalking, and killing the prey in close combat, and this was no easy task. The carrier supported the hunter, scouting the area for other dangerous creatures and defending their hunter as the hunt ensued. This reliance on cooperation led to a tightly knit and orderly society. As a result, the dragon civilization appeared from the thick jungles of night as large walled city-states. These massive cities were the only places a knight could live, as living outside the gates in the untamed wilderness meant certain death. Since the knight's only option was to live in such close-knit communities, their empathetic link with one another still multiplied. It became instinctive to them to care for one another, resulting in an ingrained societal assumption that each individual would contribute to the overall well-being of their community to the fullest extent they were capable. The needs of the self were cast aside without a thought in favor of the needs of the many. The Dei feared the Night greatly. They considered them monstrous in appearance, and most drew no distinction between the dragons and the other fearsome beasts that roamed the Nidden wilderness. Each of these worlds is either good or evil. Both worlds fell under the gaze of the Guardians. Before good and evil existed, there was only one world, and as the Guardians decreed, balance must always be kept between all things. An aspect of the Guardians' will and wisdom spoke to say, to have good below and both good, and evil above is not true balance. As the Guardians most often did, they followed this aspect of wisdom. After issuing an official decree that balance must always exist between good and evil, the Guardians decided to create them on different planes, evil on one, good on the other. The Guardians ruled over the good world, while the aspect of wisdom, whose name was Lucifer, ruled over the world of evil. The Guardians let them live in their own ways. The evil did not torture one another, as some envision hell to be. The good did not pamper themselves, as some would envision heaven to be. They each lived their chosen lifestyles their own way. That is, at least until one day Angel fell upon Night and survived. She was a Dei unlike the others, a Dei whose job was quite dangerous, a young Dei with a husband and child who waited for her return each time she departed on painfully lengthy missions. This young Dei's task was to fly into space for 3 to 6 month mining expeditions, perilously navigating the asteroid fields which passed between day and night. It was a dull task to this particular Dei, who had proudly graduated at the top of her trade school. She was a pilot by trade and an adventurer by heart. Another of her routine and lackluster work days consisting of the tracking and mining of stray asteroids had just begun, and all the while an unforeseeable accident loomed over her immediate future. This accident would lead her to discover the true differences between Night and Dei. Chapter 1. A Miner Falls. A man's voice crackled over the radio. Sector 17 through 20 checked out, mostly iron and nickel. Team leader, what's on your end? Yuki glanced down at her instruments and back to the radio. A whole lot of carbon, Jaffiel, she grinned. Smooth white tea showing past a pair of soft pink lips. And what seemed to be water, ice, can't tell though. I'll have to take a sample. She directed an arm on the small ship as it reached out and broke off a chunk of the large black asteroid just beyond her cockpit. Her blue eyes flashed at the console in front of her as it read, 93.87% carbon-C, for 0.98% silica dioxide, SiO2, 1.15% dihydrogen monoxide, H2O. The feathers on the large golden wings sprouting from her back eased as she relayed the percentages. Well, we finally got us a haul. A third voice, their other team member Jax, yelped enthusiastically from Yuki's radio. She looked down and smiled, then replied good-naturedly, Jax, shut up. I'd say it about 12 tons of carbon. I've seen a few bigger, but that makes it easy to take back. Plenty for jewelry and industrial use, though. We're going to get some recognition for this. I'm sure of it. Jaffiel came back. We need to get it back first. Jaffiel and Jax. Tow this chunk back to the freighter. I'm going to take one last scan of the area and make sure we're not missing any smaller chunks of this thing drifting around. Yuki stated matter-of-factly into the radio, "We'll do Yuki, over and out." Two similar ships quickly moved to either side of the large black chunk of space rock. The ships that Yuki and her team piloted were not large. Each could fit only one person inside comfortably. Each ship had a small set of engines at the rear, and their only defining feature was the large glass cockpit. The front of the ship bulged outwards with supporting metal frames crossing the edges of the dome glass. The ships each had warning lights on their short wings, nose, and tail. The bulk of each ship was their cockpit. The wings and tail looked like little stubs of things attached to giant eggs. The ship's glass-like window that was heavily tinted deeply to hide the pilots from the blinding ultraviolet rays of the sun. A pair of skids sat at the bottom of each small ship, with a hatch sitting at the top, sealed up tightly. The smaller mining ships were painted white. In contrast to their larger mothership, this design was intended to promote ease of spotting them in case of an emergency. Two large barbed spears fired from each small ship, digging into the large asteroid. After the lines drew taut, each ship fired up their engines. They towed the large chunk of space rock toward the freighter. The freighter was a massive black and brown hunk of metal floating aimlessly in the void of space, modeled as a cylinder for the majority of its length. The front sprouted a bulb that housed a set of small windows. The lit windows shone brightly when compared to the dull colors of the outside hull, their light blue hue showcasing the four rectangular windows cut into the hull of the large vessel. On the opposite side of the ship was a huge opening with what appeared to be large ramps or doors that would open for transport, and then close back on themselves to seal the opening. On either side of the ship, mounted to two bulky wings, was a pair of large cylinder-shaped engines. A red glow poured out of one side of the large cylinders, while small red and green warning lights flashed on either side. The large brown and black ship sported red and blue warning lights flashing at deliberate, well-placed points along its hull, almost outlining the shape of the darkness, though the exact seam at which the ship ended and the vast backdrop of space began was difficult to determine. Jax's voice, now mischievous, came over Yuki's radio again. "Hey, darling, you gonna tell me to do anything else?" Yuki's smile faded slightly. "Ugh, you wish." "A man can dream, darling," he snorted. Yuki rolled her eyes, her cheeks blushing in annoyance. Her ship floated about for a moment as she headed toward one of the larger chunks of orbiting asteroids. "Iron mix would come on. We need carbon on this run." "Oh," she clicked on her radio. "And boys, don't forget to mark those iron nickel ores with the trackers. We'll still get credit for them if someone else finds them later when we come back looking for iron nickel." "I number one will do." The calmer voice of Joffel came over the radio. "Oh, baby, I love a woman who knows what she wants. They're already marked yuck." Yuki clicked on her radio to a private channel, paging the other pilot directly. "Jax? What yuck? Why are we on private chatter?" Yuki was silent. "Just no, okay? Cool your jets. Can't help it with you revving my engine, darling." Jax smiled at his own radio, his brown eyes looking over at Yuki's ship. "I'd be a lot more fun than your husband." Yuki's face twisted to a sly grin. This moment of distracted fun was short-lived and quickly became gut-wrenching as she realized with a gasp that her ship had inexplicably moved toward the iron ore deposit in front of her far faster than expected. "Whoa!" she shouted as she desperately pulled back on the ship's throttle, while her ship to begin to move backward. The stubborn asteroid continued barreling on a trajectory toward her. In an instant it raced up and crashed into Yuki's ship, bumping the glass of the small craft, causing it to spin out of control. As it did, the engines rotated toward the asteroid and the ship silently smashed into its surface again, this time causing flakes of metal from the ship to snap off like raindrops, sticking to the asteroid's smooth surface. As the ship was firmly drawn to the asteroid, bits of broken rock blasted away from its surface. "What the fuck? 2, 3, come in. Guys, Jax, Joffiel, do you read?" Yuki felt truly shaken as she shouted into her radio. "I read ya team leader. We just got the call back signal. Time's officially up. We got a hightailer before dash." Jax was promptly cut off by Yuki. "Jax, damn it, I'm stuck." "Stuck?" Joffiel questioned. "Yes. I don't know W dash. Yuki's devices blinked at random, malfunctioning, one warning appearing on her screen after another with each less legible than the last. What Yuki could gather from the messages was, "Warning, magnetite, FE304. Damn it." Yuki yelled into the radio, "I'm stuck to a giant magnet." Radio headquarters, quickly. Jaffiel yelled through Yuki's radio, "Hold on, doing it now." Jax chimed into the radio, "Don't fret, darling. We'll get you out of there." "No, you won't. Not till we get an okay from Farnsworth. We don't know how to deal with this. It'll stick you two to it, and then we'll all be in trouble." Jaffiel's voice then echoed into the radio, which on Yuki's end was beginning to break up. "Yuki, we can't do anything. Didn't come equipped with any. Toll lines are already hauling the carbon, and companies just swapped me to 1 and Jax to 2. Yuki looked at the radio in despair as static quickly took over. She looked out her cockpit window, noting the ship was drifting away from Jax and Jaffiel's ships. She cursed at herself as she gently spun in space, in total silence as the asteroid now entirely blocked the radio signal from her team. She powered off the engines in the main console, leaving only her life support on. Yuki, remembering her training, reached into a compartment overhead. Damn it! She looked out and noted she was falling out of orbit, destined to crash on Dei's sister planet, Night. Oh no. She felt a shiver run down her spine as she opened a box from the overhead compartment and pulled out a small booklet. Survival in Space. The manual stated proudly on its cheaply printed front cover. She turned the pages to the index and quickly looked up the section called Facts About Night. She flipped it open and studied the first page. As many of us know, Dei's nearest neighbor, Night, is very close to our own world, and it is likely that if you become lost you may crash land there. Though our orbit is faster than Night's, our worlds pass extremely close to one another 5 times every 13 years. Night is a very dangerous planet to be stranded on. There are no Dei outposts, and there are no treaties between Night and Dei. Little is known about Night, as most never return from an encounter there. However, we are aware of the existence of the dominant race, known as the Dragons of Night. Yuki's skin crawled as she inspected an illustration of a dragon on the page. The drawing depicted a fearsome creature, its hands outstretched as if ripping and tearing into something. It had sharp claws covered in blood, and its mouth was open in a menacing snarl. The face protruded into a lizard-like snout filled with razor-sharp teeth. Bits of saliva hung from between its upper and lower jaw, strung out between its teeth. The creature's wings were shown to be leathery, bony, and strong. The entire physique appeared thoroughly imposing. Its tail bent toward the front as if being used as a whip. This too looked muscular and deadly. All of this was displayed in a crouching position. The creature bent low to the ground on 2 powerful legs, massive claws popping up from its feet. The pose made Yuki shiver a bit. "I hope I don't run into one of these monsters," she read on past illustration. The night dragons are strictly carnivores and are built for successful hunting. They are voracious hunters and are known to kill for sport as well as for food. Some of the prey they are known to pursue are shown on the next page. Yuki turned the page to see a barrage of very large feathered reptilian creatures. Some appeared almost avian hybrid in nature. The smallest prey creature shown was the size of a minivan. She continued to look through and noted an illustration of a smaller night dragon. A baby, perhaps? Next to that was a picture of a Dei Angel, standing in a very static pose. They eat their own young, and us. She shuddered again as she read more. Night are volatile, violent, and easily provoked. They are extremely territorial. If you should happen upon a village, do not enter the village. It may give off the appearance of civilization, but do not be fooled. A Dei will most certainly be ripped to shreds. It is recommended to stay in the jungle and live off of the flora and fauna shown on the next page. Yuki sighed in despair, not bothering to look at the pictures, and placed the book down. She turned her console back on and inspected the navigation screen, which was still flickering due to the magnetic interference. The screen displayed a crash landing imminent on Night, announcing the warning with several bright red symbols. Yuki tried to hold back tears as she reclined her head and closed her eyes. "Fuck me!" She jolted up as her console suddenly started screaming warnings. She grabbed at the controls. What now? Warning messages popped up furiously as Night's gravity pulled a large chunk of magnetic rock downward, dragging Yuki's helpless ship along for the ride. As the asteroid entered Night, it began to superheat in the atmosphere, causing the engines in Yuki's ship to do the same. Yuki's eyes went wide as she monitored the external temperatures and did her best to hit the manual ignition. I gotta get off this fucking stove. She struggled with the controls, trying to force her ship to respond. As she forced the starting mechanism of the small ship to activate, a small injector for fuel cell began to leak a steady stream of hydrogen from its rapidly heating casing. As the meteor continued its freefall, its magnetic properties faded as it transitioned to a molten ball of fiery metal. When the hydrogen came into contact with the superheated fireball, it ignited, causing the fuel cells to explode. The explosion sent Yuki's ship out away from the surface in a sudden blast as a barrage of warning messages exploded on the craft's main console. "What in the name of heaven happened?" she cried out as she tried to punch the now non-existent engines. Her ship was soon pulled back toward Night, the glass dome aiming directly at the surface as the heat shields barely managed to hold. "Turn back!" she cried out. Sweat drenched her brow as her wide blue eyes flashed from warning to warning on her console. She grabbed at the manual control stick and forced the small positioning thrusters to engage. Only one managed to comply. The other was too badly damaged in the explosion of the ship's fuel cells. The result was that Yuki's ship was forced into a downward spiral. Yuki closed her eyes tightly as the G-force from her spin pinned her firmly to her seat, hard and fast. She tried to examine the heads-up display on her screen, watching the speed and direction of her spin, as well as her current landing site, a large expanse of forest. Yuki knew she had to avoid the land at all costs. She would not survive if her craft smashed into the trees, or worse, solid ground. With concentrated effort and practiced breathing, she identified a lake that the navigation computer advised as a possible landing site. The problem was she was well off course for said landing site. Yuki focused and began to slow her spiral by timing the single working thruster to only fire at key intervals. After several bursts, her spin slowed and her trajectory changed, successfully aiming the doomed ship closer to her desired water landing spot. Her breath hitched, and her vision began to darken along the edges. The G-force had reduced slightly, but not to the point where her heart struggled any less to push blood into her brain. Tunnel vision soon threatened to transition to a complete blackout. Yuki struggled to reclaim control of her breathing. As she exited the upper atmosphere, she reached towards her emergency landing lever, pulling on the lever as hard as she could. Yuki had to trust the computer because she knew as she pulled her chute, she wouldn't be able to remain conscious. As the chute unfurled, Yuki lurched forward, her restraints pulling her back into her seat as the sudden shock knocked her out completely. As soon as the impact occurred, a burst of protective foam erupted from the front of the console, rapidly expanding and encasing Yuki's body. The ship's two large parachutes slowed her craft's descent into dangerous alien territory. Yuki's ship floated and gently bobbed to the surface of the lake, while its warning lights soldiered on, blinking steadily. The ship's life support began to decompress Yuki's body as she slept soundly through the day and even into the night. Even though the crash event all transpired in a matter of moments, it did not go unnoticed by the natives. A hunting pair of night dragons spotted two large meteorites shooting through the sky, landing nearly 2 kilometers apart from each other. A male blue dragon turned to his hunting companion, a red female dragon, and pointed it out. The red dragon nodded, intrigued, and started toward it, the blue dragon following closely behind. They then spotted the parachutes opening on the small craft as well. They exchanged an excited look, their eyes gleaming. Jaffiel looked to his instruments, glaring at them. Bastards! How can they not load rescue and landing gear to save more storage room for minerals? Jax didn't say anything. "2, do you copy?" Jax softly sighed. "Copy. No rescue or landing gear. Poor Yuki. May the guardian Lucifer have pity on your soul." "Come on, Jax," Jaffiel grumbled. "We need to load this into the main shipping vessel, then report back to Farnsworth for debriefing." "I'll debrief him good. I'll tell you what," he yelled over the radio, both small white ships navigating back toward the larger black and brown craft. Jax looked back at Night with a frown on his face. Yuck, good luck, love. Of Night and Day, Chapter 2, the sun rose the next morning, shining over the alien landscape and the small freshwater lake. Disoriented with a small moan, Yuki slowly opened her eyes. She became aware of feeling strangely immobilized. Her brain desperately tried to process what had happened. Yuki realized that she was held fast by the kinetic dampening foam. Kinetic dampening foam is a yellow liquid, typically stored in high compression tubes located in every angle of a ship's cockpit. If the ship suffers a sudden collision, the foam containers break on impact and immediately coat everything. The liquid becomes spongy once it is released and hardens more over time. Yuki groaned, finding that she was encapsulated by foam. With a bitter sigh, she pulled her arms out of crusty substance. She cleared off the main console and saw a mess of messages flickering across the cracked screen. Steeling her nerves, she grabbed her survival kit and hit the explosive bolts on the escape hatch. The glass-like viewing window and console blasted away from her. With a loud pop, she looked out toward the shore, grateful to see it was not very far. The shoreline and surrounding land appeared to be deserted, which gave her a small measure of hope. She took a deep breath and slung the survival kit over her shoulder. With a deep breath, Yuki dove out of the cockpit, causing the broken ship to bob up and down in the frigid water. Yuki was on high alert for anything dangerous that could be lurking in the lake as she carefully swam the short distance to the narrow beach. Trying to move as stealthily as possible, she wrung her hair out as she half waded and half crawled from the water up onto sand. She spread her large yellow wings out and back, stretching and then flapping them slowly, drying them off. The cold water beat against her sun-kissed feathers, spraying around her in a fine mist. The sun shimmered off of Yuki's sleek blue and silver accented flight suit. It was primarily blue. The trim on the arms, legs, shoulders, and the collar was a reflective silver fabric. The suit was fairly form-fitting, and for the most part, it acted as well as any other clothing. A helmet usually went on first and sealed the suit as it zipped up. Yuki had not donned her helmet, which remained in the ship. She looked down at her watch, shielding her eyes from the bright sunlight with her hand. The sudden weight of normal gravity assaulted her every muscle as she barely stood upright. Her whole body ached. Maintaining her balance was a struggle as she flexed her stiff leg muscles. They weren't used to anything more than just operating the two directional pedals in her ship and her slow swim across the lake. The past 7 months spent in low and zero gravity wasn't helping her any as she tried to steady herself. A strange bird called in the distance. Yuki's gloved hands grasped the survival kit and filled with the lid to remove the waterproof seal. She reached into her kit and pulled out a pair of glasses sporting polarized lenses. She quickly slipped them on, allowing her to survey her surroundings more easily. The trees nearby had green and orange fruit hanging from their branches. Yuki searched through the booklet, hoping it would confirm whether the alien fruit was edible. Scanning the images with green check marks first, she quickly identified a picture resembling the exotic fruit. It was a relief to see that in addition to what she had just found, there were also many more fruits, nuts and forage items that were safe to eat. Yuki rushed to pluck a few of what seemed to be the best-looking orange pear-shaped fruit within her reach. She dropped them into a large canvas bag that she had unfolded from the kit. Wondering what to do next, she scanned the area again. She cursed silently upon realizing she was in the open and completely exposed. Yuki contemplated what was best at the moment, taking refuge in the nearby cover of the forest, or attempting to salvage more supplies from the floating ship before she could leave the crash site. After stowing the survival kit under the fruit tree, she dashed back to the shore, cringing as another shrill bird call rang out. She steeled herself and made her decision. She dove into the lake and swam back to the wreckage. She grabbed at the tethers that held the parachutes to the capsule and slowly tugged at them, pulling the capsule back to the beach behind her. Once she was on shore, she painstakingly pulled the parachutes from the lake, grunting and struggling as each was far heavier filled with water. After considerable effort, she successfully salvaged both chutes from the water. She quickly pulled a small knife from her kit and worked about sawing through the thick cords attaching the chutes to her capsule. She did her best to wring any water from them before awkwardly rolling them up and tucking one under each arm. After retrieving the supplies, Yuki trudged back to the tree line, anxiously casting glances in every direction. Next, the search for a suitable place to make a shelter began as she studied her survival book again. After the night dragon section, she found the terrain section. The Nitin terrain is very much livable if you stay out of sight. If you familiarize yourself with the area quickly and follow this guide carefully, you will likely survive until rescue can make it to your location. Below is a list of landscape types you may encounter. Please turn to the page that has the type you are now, and review the others later. Yuki looked over the sections and found a page that reads Forest. The forest is a very good place to be, as long as you avoid clearings at all times. Clearings are where the night dragons go hunting, making these areas extremely hazardous. Night dragons are known to dive down into forest clearings, enabling them to locate and then pursue their prey by chasing after them in flight. Nitin dragons are built to fly and hunt, despite their undomesticated and crazed behavior. They are highly capable of tracking. Once they zero in on prey on the ground, they can pursue very efficiently. Your best option is to duck into a forest, run amongst the trees, and hope to escape their reach. Do not stop running. Do not attempt to hide. Yuki trembled as she absorbed this information. Yuki understood the instructions, but the warnings did not sit well with her. Absolutely no clearings, and run, run, run. Yuki said to herself as she cast a glance behind her, her wings shifting slightly to allow her to see over them. Her feathers ruffled as she looked back to the book. Build a shelter that will efficiently protect you from being initially spotted by dragons. Pick a spot deep in the woods. The higher the tree density, the better. Aim for clusters of large trees, only 2 to 3 feet apart if possible. This will make it unlikely that a Nitin dragon will discover you, as well as prevent them from landing in your area. Your shelter should be built with the intention to conceal you from an aerial sighting. Covering the top of the leaves of a low-level bush like this, the guide showed a picture of a blue pine-like bush with long and outreaching branches. Will keep you inconspicuous. Yuki looked around and was relieved to spot the exact bush not too far from her. She knew what she had to do. Cut it down and escape as far into the forest as she could. This lake seemed to be a prime water source, so it was unlikely to remain unpopulated for much longer. The 2 night dragons swooped down and circled above a large, newly formed crater in the forest. The meteor they had been searching for lay in the center of a circle of pulverized trees. They both frowned at it as they landed. The blue night dragon picked it up and roared in pain, dropping the still hot chunk of metal. The red one gave him a light smack on the back of the head with her tail. "You dolt!" she shouted, admonishing him. With the blue knight now whimpering in pain, she sniffed the air. If this was the meteorite, then the only other sense similar, she pointed. The blue knight frowned at her. So that means? The red night dragon's expression grew exasperated. "The ship is this way," she announced, pointing toward the nearby lake. The pair swiftly took flight, hot on Yuki's trail. An hour or so after selecting a suitable spot, Yuki had made decent progress on a frame for her shelter. Feeling hungry, she looked into the bag, grabbed some fruit, and took a bite. It was surprisingly bland. She decided to take inventory on every item in the kit, as there were a few pouches she hadn't yet opened. There could be something to aid in construction of her shelter. She found a lighter, plastic bags, some matches, a blanket, a plastic tarp, and a small multi-tool device with a small knife, file pliers, and assorted other tiny tools. In addition, Yuki found a solar-powered electric lamp and a small firearm. Yuki inspected the weapon and frowned. Upon peering through a hole in the magazine, she saw only 1 bullet. What good is 1? Her heart sank. My guardian, I pray I don't need to use this. Yuki looked around at the immediate area, taking in the strange beauty of the uncanny landscape. Off in the distance, she heard the calls of strange birds, chirping of small creatures scurrying through the trees, and the occasional buzzing of insects. As Yuki took in the sights, however, everything seemed to fall still. A loud cackle echoed down from above. The sunlight that streamed to the trees vanished as a massive brown creature flew overhead, blocking the view of the sky. Its wingspan looked to be nearly 20 meters. She gasped at the size of the flying monster. I need to finish this shelter. Yuki said out loud to no one in particular. As the evening wore on, Yuki had finally set about making a decent enough shelter. Her efforts were hampered by a painful stomach ache that seemed to strike out of nowhere, but she had soldiered on. Using sticks and some of the parachute cords cut to specific lengths, she had managed to arrange one of the chutes as a good waterproof roof. The walls along the edges were logs and sticks propped up along a few suspended chute cords. The inner walls were lined with a second chute, which also stretched out to cover the majority of the floor. She layered the tarp over the chute on the ground to fully cover everything, and finally sat down in her newly minted temporary home. She kicked her boots off and set them in the corner to dry. She peeled off her flight suit, and then lit the small lantern from the kit. The sun had long since begun its descent into the distance, and she was exhausted. She laid down along the edge of one of the walls in her rounded hut-like shelter. She closed her eyes, hearing the odd noises of the night not too far away. She was too anxious to fall asleep quickly. I need to get fire in here. She looked up at the center of the parachute roof, wondering if the vents in the center were good enough to allow some air to pass through. I should make it inside in the morning just to make sure I have something to cook with. She closed her eyes again and took a deep breath. The first evening on Night. Here's praying I wake up in the morning. Sitting behind a small desk, wearing a small earpiece and smart-looking glasses, sat an attractive dark-haired angel with large blue wings. The sound of her fingers tapping and dancing across a keyboard could be heard as her manicured nails clashed against the plastic. Her desk sat adjacent to a large, expensive wooden door with matching ornate gold hinges, knob and lock with a classic-looking keel. A solid gold nameplate read simply, Eric Swordjoy, CO. She heard the phone ring and quickly placed her finger on a button, speaking with a soft sing-song voice, but looking as though she'd rather be somewhere else. Farnsworthing, Mr. Swordjoy's office. How can I help you? There was silence as she rolled her eyes. Mr. Swordjoy doesn't speak to reporters one-on-one. I can't. Another awkward silence ensued. You need a statement regarding the mining accident right this second? Okay, here's a statement. She cleared her throat. No comment. She released a button, then pressed another button next to the one she had before. Mr. Swordjoy, the press is demanding a statement. A calm and bored voice came over the other end into the woman's ears. Tell them that we are deeply troubled over the family's loss, and we hope to dash. It's Yuki Carcade, she interjected. She was met with stony silence. Mr. Swordjoy? Did I ask you what her name was? He barked. The woman rolled her eyes. No, sir. As I was saying, we pray that she is alive, but the chances are slim. Tell one of the PR boys to stage a press conference on it and stress that we cannot risk more loss of life by sending rescuers down tonight. Yes, sir. I'll have them redact the no comment. She released the button. Swordjoy immediately stormed out his office, glaring at the young lady behind the desk. Excuse me. Swordjoy's piercing green eyes bored into the woman. His stern face affixed the woman in fear as his anger projected towards her. Fiery red hair was well combed on his head, his athletic frame adorned in an outrageously expensive designer suit. Swordjoy stood 190 centimeters tall. His red wings were immaculate, despite the feathers at the top ruffling slightly in anger as his gaze bore into his assistant. The assistant was startled, to say the least. Her boss almost never spoke to her face-to-face. When they kept calling, and I didn't know what to tell them. You hadn't responded to me, and I ended up telling them that no comment was a statement. Are you the legal department? Swordjoy said flatly, his feathers smoothing on their own as he strode directly to the front of her desk. Well, it's standard boilerplate to say dash. Rebecca, Swordjoy started slowly. What is your title here? Executive assistant? Rebecca started shifting uncomfortably in her seat. Swordjoy slammed both his hands on her desk, causing the shoulder pads on his black suit jacket to bunch up. His red tie was held to his white shirt by a golden pin that resembled a small scale. So, is it your job to say anything to the press besides, he isn't taking any calls at this time? Rebecca swallowed hard and nodded. No, sir. I'll make sure that going forward. You'll make sure going forward. In your next position, you will not be so careless." Rebecca frowned, looking up at the stern face of the executive towering over her. "Why, you mean, get out." Swordjoy's voice was firm on the matter, his green eyes never leaving Rebecca's. Rebecca silently gathered her possessions and rushed to an elevator across the room, a large formal reception area that was outside Swordjoy's massive office. Swordjoy picked up the phone as Rebecca slunk into the elevator. "HR? Yes." "Hello, Susan." Another incompetent. "Yes." Gave a press statement without my authority. "I want accreditations this time. Someone with business," since Swordjoy smirked a bit to himself. "Maybe a blonde." Light streamed in from the vent holes at the top of Yuki's shelter. She jolted awake and listened carefully for several seconds. Not sensing any immediate danger, she stretched, spreading her wings as well. With a groan, Yuki looked around. A few black beetles had wandered inside and were crawling a little too close for comfort to her resting space. She quickly shook her flight suit out before sliding it back on. "Wish I had a change of clothing." She slid the wet boots on and grumbled a bit at the discomfort. Need to get a fire going. Many long hours later, Yuki had finished a small fire pit inside her shelter. Inspired by her fireplace back home, she had designed an apparatus from a few lashed-together branches and some thread that moved the tarp cover away from a vent or back onto it, depending on how she pushed or pulled the branch near the floor. This allowed her both a vent for smoke and a way to close off the open vents if she needed, in the event of rain, or for more protection from those beetles and other bugs as she slept. She flicked the lighter, and after a few tries, she managed to get a fire going. She quickly pulled her boots off and placed them near the fire to dry out. She sighed, flexing her toes in the newfound heat. She repeated the action with her flight suit. There was nothing more for her to do, so she relaxed near the fire and enjoyed the feeling of the sweat of the day evaporating from her body. Her feet still seemed badly waterlogged, and she hoped she wasn't going to end up with some sort of alien fungus on top of her other problems. Later in the afternoon, while lightly dozing off, she heard more distant chirping and sat up. She felt her stomach grumble. It still felt a bit queasy, but she couldn't ignore her growing hunger. She pulled out a few freeze-dried food rations from her survival kit. Egg hash butter flavoring was the most edible option she found. Breakfast of champions. She chomped on the rations and combed through the kit, noting she only had 4 remaining packs, and 2 of those were alarmingly labeled diced meat product. Ugh, I thought I had more, she sighed, dreading the idea of leaving her sanctuary. She stood up and put on her newly dry suit and boots. As she dressed, she heard the chirping again, seemingly directly outside her shelter now. It sounded like a small animal. Could she kill for food, perhaps? With trepidation, she fished a knife out of her bag. Yuki hesitated for a moment and picked up the firearm too, just in case. As Yuki tiptoed out of the shelter, she was expecting to find a small furry mammal comparable to a rabbit or large squirrel, judging by the somewhat cute chirping noise it made. Fear coursed through her, and she froze in her tracks instantly. Outside her shelter, no more than 10 meters away, stood a group of 3 large and very dangerous-looking feathered beasts. All of them were curiously sniffing around her campsite. Luckily, they hadn't noticed her appearance in the doorway. She held her breath and didn't move a muscle, praying they would simply move on. Each had brilliant white and yellow feathers with red trim. Their build showed that they clearly walked on 2 feet, lizard-like feet. Gray, scaly flesh covered a large claw-bearing toe. The feathers covered a set of powerful-looking legs. A massive tail stuck out stiffly from behind the creature, extending over 2 meters. They sported 2 short arms, feathers making them almost wing-like, moving up along their narrow but barreled chests. Their heads were massive and clearly predatory, razor-sharp teeth filling their hungry maws, with their yellow eyes in the front and 2 ridges of feathers running along the front to the back. Yuki was so terrified that she tried to silently retreat back into her shelter. The moment she took a delicate step back, one of the creatures swiveled its head and looked directly at her. The other 2 followed suit, and they started their chirping noises again. This time, the chirps were punctuated with low growls as they fanned into a formation clearly meant to block her escape. All 3 of them began to slowly advance. Yuki spread her wings as wide as she could, dropped the knife, and drew her pistol, aiming at the center creature, the largest of the trio. The three creatures stopped in their tracks, taken aback by Yuki's apparent sudden increased size. Yuki's heart was racing, throbbing in her chest and her ears. She heard her father's voice echo in her mind. That time he took her to shooting range as a teenager. Shoot for center mass. You're most likely to hit something, his voice reminded her. Yuki took a solid and steady breath as she trained her weapon on the center creature. She had only one shot to take, and they would be on top of her within seconds. Her only hope was that killing the center one would cause the other two to flee. They don't know I only have one bullet. I just have to make this shot. She took careful aim and squeezed the trigger. A bang rang out in Yuki's ears, and the gun kicked back slightly in her hands. The largest creature let out a bellowing roar of pain and collapsed to the ground. The other two creatures on either side let out distressed cries of their own. They nudged the fallen creature on the ground with their noses. They chirped at each other before running off into the forest, not giving Yuki a second glance. Yuki's pulse raced as she examined the massive dead animal in front of her. Blood began to pool around its body. Her ears were still ringing, and she relaxed her wings, wincing at their sudden stretching. She fell to her knees and dropped the weapon. Shit. She picked up the gun and then checked the magazine, confirming that it was now empty. Shit! Yuki yelled to no one in particular. She got up, dusted herself off, and picked up the heavy knife she had brought outside. Okay, one problem at a time, Yuki said out loud. She decided that since food was a major concern, she would have to use whatever she could get her hands on. While it wasn't what she had expected, she would use what she could from the creatures she killed, for as long as she could, with one mighty swing after another. Yuki made several attempts to remove the head of the large creature. It was messy work. She grimaced as sweat poured down her face and blood splashed onto her skin. After the fourth swing, the gruesome head finally gave way. Yuki, operating on primal instinct, found a sturdy stick and whittled two ends into spikes. She rammed one end in the ground and mounted the creature's head on the top. If more come back, they'll see I killed the big one. Was this their mother maybe? As Yuki moved to the body, she picked the large knife back up and readied herself for the task ahead. The two night dragons flew over the lake and descended near the shoreline. Both took some water from the lake and drank. The female knight, Lazarus, turned to her companion. Fezzik, you need to start scouting the area for that ship, okay? The Angel is going to be running around the woods, and we've lost too much time already. We need to find it as quickly as possible. Fezzik, the blue male, nodded. Look for the ship. Got it. He didn't move and just grinned widely. Lazarus gave Fezzik an exasperated stare. Well, Fezzik pointed to the far side of the lake. Found it. He laughed and shoved his partner playfully. Lazarus turned around and chuckled. Oh, aren't you clever? Yuki finished skinning and gutting the beast. She put the edible meat, or what she considered likely edible, inside a few small plastic bags. Most of the bones and organs were disposed of into a murky pond a safe distance away from her camp. She tied up the 3 bags of meat to a parachute cord and threw the other line over a large tree branch, hoisting the bags into the air. Using water she collected earlier, she set to washing herself clean. 1.5 days down, rest of my life to go, she sighed. She entered her shelter to sit down and rest. She rekindled the fire and then began to inspect her radio. It was probably a useless hope, but still, it would be crazy not to at least try. She pressed the call button on the radio. Hello, this is Yuki in the blind. Anyone hear me? I am stranded on Night. I am in a forest within walking distance of the crash site, requesting immediate assistance. She waited but received no response. Lazarus was circling around the lake and surrounding forest for some time. Fezzik flew close alongside her. If we want to find the Dei, we're going to have to camp out and wait for it to return to the ship, he remarked. We won't be able to see it from up here if it's hiding. Lazarus growled in frustration. Then get some hammocks up in the trees, someplace where we can see the ship, but the Dei won't notice us. Fezzik nodded and landed along the tree line, unpacking some gear. Yuki sat in her shelter, gazing out the hole in the parachute ceiling. Smoke from the fire rose through it, lazily winding up into the sky as she chewed on a chunk of charred meat from her kill. She had the field guide in one hand and read up on the beastie as she ate. Up to 2 meters tall, hunts in packs. Rippers, named for the large toe claw on their hind legs. Wonderful. If the dragons don't eat me, these rippers will. Yuki set the field guide down and leaned back, taking another bite out of the ripper meat. She clicked the radio again. Hello? Hello. If this thing is designed to communicate from Night, then why the hell aren't you guys answering? Her demands were met by nothing but static. Someone answer me. I'm going to die here. Yuki shouted. She closed her eyes, turning the radio off. I'm going to die here, she repeated, as a few tears ran down her face. She turned to her side, looking at the door of her shelter. I'm going to die, and I'll never see my family again, not Jeffrey, not Aphod. Oh, Guardian. Yuki rolled onto her back and stared at the hole in her ceiling. She thought back to her wedding to her husband, Aphod. Several years earlier, a younger Yuki stood in front of a mirror. A slightly older woman tugged on her bodice, cinching the waist of her elaborate white dress. Oof, Mom, too much. Yuki whined. Nonsense. You're supposed to make it tight, so he's turned on as you walk down the aisle. She whispered into her ear, and keep him roiling throughout the reception. Trust me, it will be great. Yuki raised an eyebrow at her mother. Not really sure I should take advice from a divorced woman. Yuki's mother laughed. Oh, please, dear. The woman laughed. She was about Yuki's height, with dark black hair and tan wings. She had ice blue eyes that mirrored Yuki's own. Aphod's a lovely boy, smart, knows how to treat a woman, and most importantly, an honest man. She beamed. You did well. Better than I did. A gruff male voice permeated the room. Is that so, Celia? On our wedding night. You seem to have a much different opinion. Oh, Cedric, you do always know how to ruin a moment. Celia replied jokingly. She turned Yuki around to face her father. Well, what do you think? Cedric smiled. Stunning. Aphod the lucky man. Cedric hugged Yuki and gave her a kiss on the cheek. Speaking of which, the boy looks absolutely terrified standing up there. I'm thinking of letting him stew for a bit longer. He grinned. Or you and I could just head on out of here and leave him at the altar. Yuki rolled her eyes. Daddy, I love him. Cedric sighed. Well then, I guess we'll just have to make it down the aisle. He coughed a bit, rubbing his shoulder. Daddy, are you okay? Yuki asked. Fine, just fine, Cedric reassured her, taking a pill with a swig of bottled water. Let's get this show on the road. Celia looked at Cedric oddly, said, Come along, Celia. You have to take your place, he said swiftly. Moments later, Yuki was walking down the aisle with her father, arm in arm. Yuki looked at Aphod and smiled broadly at her handsome husband-to-be. Aphod was tall, a trait she liked, and had dark brown wings to match his brown eyes. He beamed at Yuki, and she smiled back through her veil. He looked sharp in a well-tailored suit with. As she approached, she happily noticed how many friends and family surrounded her. She smiled at all of them as she walked slowly past the rows of people. She was doing her best to keep a good posture, despite the agonizingly high heels and the need to keep her wings drawn up and held back as she walked. She halted momentarily as she spotted an empty seat in front next to her mother. She glared, whispering, I knew it. Cedric tightened his grip on her arm and tugged her forward slightly. Yuki tried to forget the empty seat near the front as she turned to smile at Aphod. Cedric turned to his daughter and grinned, lifted her veil, and planted a kiss on her cheek. He whispered to her, I'm proud of you. He moved to sit down next to Celia, patting his forehead with a handkerchief. Later on, in the banquet hall, Yuki and Aphod were laughing, celebrating with champagne, and enjoying their day when Celia came up to them, smiling at the happy couple. You having fun with your wife, dear? Celia sang out, smiling at Aphod. Aphod smiled warmly and gazed at Yuki. Yes, he replied emphatically. Yuki laughed. I just can't get used to being called that. You will? Celia smiled distractedly, and her gaze darted around the room, surveying the guests. Don't be mad, hon. But your father and I are going to cut out a little early, okay? Aphod frowned a bit. Everything okay? Celia clasped each of their hands with both of hers and squeezed tightly. Oh, we're fine, maybe a bit better than fine, she winked. Anyway, you two make sure to enjoy your party and have a wonderful wedding night. Yuki smiled, picking up what she thought to be a hint that her parents wanted some alone time, and hugged her mother tightly. Goodbye. Love you, Mom. I love you too, baby. Celia rushed off quickly. Yuki would find out the next day that her father was suffering from a heart attack for most of the wedding and the beginning of the reception. Yuki paced around the hospital room as Cedric lay resting, anxiously fussing over all the IVs and monitoring equipment connected to him. She whined in frustration. I cannot believe you, Daddy. Cedric chuckled to himself and shushed her. I didn't want to ruin your special day, sweetie. You'll only get one wedding after all. Cedric frowned. At long as Aphod minds himself. He seemed to want to say more, but abruptly began to cough. Yuki studied the label on one of the 4 medicine bags. The doctor said you're lucky to be alive. Cedric nodded. Lucky, maybe, dialing my cardiologist before I started down the aisle with you, and asking your mother to quietly take me to the hospital during the reception made it a bit more likely. Yuki sighed. You always have everything planned. How can you schedule a heart attack? Cedric laughed, then suffered another coughing fit. Yuki tensed, feeling a small wave of fear wash over her. She loved her father so much, maybe even more than anyone else in the world. Seeing him in this frail state was deeply upsetting. The wedding ceremony meant nothing in comparison to her father's life. Daddy, she whimpered, I will never forgive myself if you don't recover from this. It's because of me that you're here. A tear ran down her cheek. I'll be fine, it was my choice, and I don't regret it. It was a beautiful wedding. Besides, I'm not going anywhere until you give me a grandchild. Yuki looked away. Well, I guess someone has to save the venom toward your brother for something else. He had other obligations. Please understand that. Yuki grumbled. Okay, so his only sister is getting married, and there's something more important than that? Cedric sighed and looked at the heart monitor. Someday you will see, or maybe you won't. Yuki frowned. Dad, are you having a stroke? That didn't make any sense. Cedric smiled. You have a honeymoon to get to, don't you, dear? Yuki stood up and kissed him on the forehead. Call me if anything happens, Daddy. Cedric closed his eyes to rest more as she reluctantly took her to leave. Yuki rolled over in her shelter and groaned. Dad, am I going to see you soon? Of Night and Day, Chapter 3, Jack slammed the headset against the wall in anger, only to have his movement forced into slow motion. He watched it weightlessly bounce around the room as his light brown eyes sullenly followed the hardware. He continued shouting at Jaffiel. Her ship survived. How come we haven't been able to communicate with her? His coffee-colored wings were fully ruffled. The large feathers prickled in irritation. He folded his sizable arms over his broad chest, glaring at Jaffiel for his lack of response. Why are you so calm? Jaffiel sighed and leaned his thin form backward, floating aimlessly through their shared room. He was trying to keep a cool head. He crossed his arms calmly, and his cyan wings remained relaxed. I know you're upset. Believe me, I am too. But what can we do? Her radio could be damaged. Maybe she's on the other side of the planet, and the signal is being blocked. Or she could have knocked her head when she landed and she's out cold, or maybe dead. He looked at Jax with solemn gray eyes. We have to accept that as a very real possibility. Jax sighed impatiently and whipped out a small tablet-like device. No, how are you not seeing this? Vitals were good when she landed, and then signal loss. She didn't magically teleport out of range after the landing, Jaffiel, and the ship survived the crash. Yet somehow the radio is broken. The radio is inside the ship. So explain that? He held the display screen up, pointing to the parts of the damage report that illustrated his case. I can't explain it, but there are different factors to consider. Line of sight loss on the ship to us, or equipment malfunction upon entering an alien atmosphere. Jaffiel heaved a heavy sigh. She could have been attacked by those dragons. They could have been there when she crashed. Listen, the techs are trying to read on her. Fucking imps. Jax shouted. We're relying on them? No. This cheap-ass company just doesn't want to pay out the cash to mount a rescue, he yelled, overcome with disgust. It's not the imp's decision, Jax. Jaffiel shook his head. Besides, if that was the case, then they want to send down the vessels. When a miner dies on duty, the payout to the miner's estate is far greater than what would cost to send a search and rescue team. If they could prevent that, they would. It can't be about money. A gruff voice echoed into the room, soon followed by a heavy-set man who floated into the pair's quarters. Jax Jaffiel. In my office now. Debrief time. I need to know everything that happened out there. Jax nodded seriously and pushed himself off the wall, floating through the doorway after his supervisor. Jaffiel followed behind until they reached a large cylinder. Here, the three managed to gently glide to the floor. The boss's office was within a large portion of the ship, which spun gently, creating a weak gravity field that held them down to floor. A table and chairs were arranged, bolted to the floor. The supervisor, Sakiel, picked up a clipboard. Let's start with Jaffiel's report. Why the hell not mine? Jax interjected. Sakiel looked at Jax and sighed. Because, Elijah, I want accuracy over passion. You appear to be clouded by emotion. Jax growled, It's Jax, sir. Sakiel stood with a clipboard in hand. A pen sat near it, tethered to board by a thin cord. Jaffiel, describe how your crew leader's ship was lost. Jax interrupted, ignoring Sakiel's instruction. Sir, we were all preparing to return to the freighter. Then Yuki reported she was in trouble. Upon my observation, it initially looked like a collision had occurred. She then reported that the asteroid she hit was magnetized and she was unable to disengage. The collision sent her ship and the asteroid into a degenerative orbit and she fell. Sakiel finished. Obviously, the asteroid was magnetite and she got herself trapped in its magnetic field. Boys, we take this very seriously. Nothing of this nature has happened before. We couldn't have anticipated such an event. The company is already evaluating its protocol to better ensure avoiding such accidents in the future. He looked at Jaffiel. Do you agree with his account of events? Jaffiel gave a silent nod, his eyes downcast. Okay, great. Anything else? Sakiel questioned brusquely, already putting his notes away. Jax cleared his throat. Yes, we requested to initiate a recovery maneuver, but Yuki herself ordered us to stand down. She advised that such an attempt would fail, that under the circumstances we would become trapped as well. She was brave, thinking of her crew above herself, and he trailed off. Jaffiel agreed. Yes, if we had proceeded with an extraction attempt. It's likely that the asteroid had a strong enough magnetic field to draw both of our ships as well. We'd all have fallen. Sakiel blinked several times and dutifully jotted it all down. Jax gathered himself and cleared his throat, continuing more forcefully. Her calm was cutting out due to the magnetic field. So Jaffiel was given number 1 status. We were ordered immediately back to the freighter with no consideration regarding Yuki's distress, and he was shut down when he asked for an action plan. She fell soon afterward. Instruments confirmed her vitals were good when she landed. The ship remained intact, but the comms were still out. The interference would no longer be an issue after the asteroid burned up. So there's something dash. I see. Thank you for the report. I'm going to radio HQ to let them know. Sakiel interrupted. You two sit tight, and I'll keep you up to date if there's any news. Let's hope Miss Carcade is okay, or at least Dash. He trailed off abruptly and cleared his throat. Jax glared at Sakiel. At least what? Sakiel heaved a sigh. At least, let's hope she didn't suffer. Yuki lay in her shelter, cold and hungry, continuing to reminisce about her life on Dei and wonder if her final days would really be spent on a dirt floor all night. Daddy, she whispered, pretending that he could somehow hear her. Yuki bounced a chubby little baby with blonde hair and blue eyes on her lap, eyeing her husband Aphod as he returned to the austere waiting room. Well, she demanded anxiously, why did Dad want to see you alone? He sighed. It's nothing for you to be concerned with. Dear, he just had some last words for me. Pearls of wisdom, you know? Yuki frowned at the vague answer, but didn't press the matter. She turned her attention back to Jeffrey, the baby on her lap. "Are you ready to see Grandpa?" she sang, booping him on the nose. The baby cooed and laughed a bit. Celia frowned, reaching over to stroke the boy's hair. "I don't know why you brought your son to witness his pappy dying." Aphod stiffened. "He wanted to see the baby, Mom. Jeffrey doesn't know what's happening. What's the harm?" Celia rolled her eyes. "A hospital is no place for the baby, unless he's sick himself. You can tell that man no at least once, Yuki. It is possible. Jeffrey shouldn't be subjected to this," she grumbled. Yuki sighed. You know I can't refuse him, Mom." "It's possible." Celia insisted. "I did. I told him, no once. I told him so long ago. It ended in divorce, but it worked." Yuki stood up, feeling suddenly exhausted. "Listen, can you two please head home? I won't be with him when he. She looked at Aphod pleadingly. Aphod sighed. "Mom, the decision has been made. Jeff will be fine. Come on, I'll take you home." He looked at his wife with concern. "You gonna be okay, love?" Yuki nodded gratefully. She and Jeffrey were soon alone in the waiting room. Yuki fished her phone from her purse and placed yet another call to her brother as they made their way down the hall towards Cedric's room. Predictably, it went to voicemail, causing a flash of rage to overtake her as she growled quietly into the phone. "Where in oblivion are you? How can you be so selfish? Dad is on his deathbed, and you haven't even stopped by. They said he doesn't have long. Hours maybe. Whatever you're doing right now, just cancel it. Get down here now." She hung up the phone and looked at the door to her father's hospital room. She took a deep breath, hugged Jeffrey, and carried him in. Labored breathing and the sound of machinery in the background filled the room. A single soft white light by the bed cast dark shadows on her father's face. Cedric stirred softly and looked up at Yuki, smiling softly. "Morning, honey. It's late, actually," Yuki said in a somber tone. Cedric chuckled. "I'd have thought you'd have gone home then." Yuki gently placed the baby on the bed next to her father before moving to sit next to him. "I'm not going anywhere, Daddy." Cedric nodded, taking her hand with his free hand as she sat down, not taking his eyes off his grandson. "Beautiful little boy, our Jeffrey." Yuki nodded and wiped a tear from her eye. "Yeah, I just wish you could see him grow up," she sniffled. "I know, honey. It's just not something that we can control," Cedric reassured her. Yuki sighed and anxiously looked at her phone. "You shouldn't worry. I've spoken to your brother. He has other responsibilities." Yuki gasped. "What? Nothing's more important than this. Dad, you're dying? Why wouldn't he want to be here? Why are you defending him?" He smiled weakly. "Because, dear, I told him not to come. Yuki, my daughter, you need to forgive him. Your brother has more on his plate than you know." Yuki's voice rose with emotion. "More on his plate? I put off my launch. I was about to be shot up into space, and I took a 90-day leave from work to catch the next flight. I put my life on hold, as anyone would do for a sick parent. He should do the same. I have a child and a husband. A whole family, Dad. What does he have? What responsibilities? To whom, exactly? What can't wait? She sucked in a breath and stopped talking. She did not want to spend her last moments with her father complaining about her brother. She was suddenly overcome with guilt and sorrow. "I'm sorry," she said softly. Cedric coughed. Death is never convenient. A light knock on the door caused Yuki to jump up in surprise. The nurses were told not to enter unless called for. To her bewilderment, an imp stood in the doorway. He stood about 120 centimeters, and he wore a formal tuxedo. He had a pair of short black horns on the top of his head, which gave way to a balding patch of hair on his bluish skin. Before she could say anything, however, he just walked in. The imp stopped, fiddling with a small object in his leather-gloved hands as he glanced at Cedric nervously. "Grand Patriarch?" Cedric coughed. "Grand what?" "This is my grandson, if that's what you mean." Yuki looked him up and down with some contempt. Imps only serve roles of laborers or house servants. What was this one doing barging into this private moment? She knew her father did not have imp friends. "Who are you?" she demanded. The imp looked at Cedric, ignoring her. Ahem, this is a present. From the club, sir, considering the unfortunate circumstance. He placed a small vial filled with blue liquid on the bedside table. Cedric nodded. My daughter, Gibbs. The imp, Gibbs, finally looked at Yuki. Pleased to meet you, Mississippi. Mrs. Yuki and Cedric said in unison, correcting the small fellow. Gibbs fidgeted awkwardly. My apologies. Cedric spoke up. She hasn't been to the club. Gibbs bowed slightly and then left without saying another word. Yuki picked Jeffrey up from the bed and sat back down, looking at her father in confusion. She looked at the vial warily. Pleased the little creature was no longer in her presence. So you're part of some exclusive imp drug cult? Cedric laughed and looked at the vial. Certainly not a friend of mine's son. He used to play cards with me, a botanist. He motioned to the vial. Keeps telling me that things like this will help to ease my transition to the afterlife. Make me calmer, clear my head, dull the pain. Yuki was having difficulty piecing together what her father was saying, and it worried her. Dad! She leaned in closer to him. Cedric took the vial and shakily handed it to Yuki, gently closing her hand around it. You keep it. Consider it a keepsake. Yuki inspected the vial in her hand, surprised at its weight for such a small object. It was capped by a cork that looked to be sealed in wax. The fluid inside had odd silver structures floating within it. What is it? She asked curiously. Never thought it polite to ask. Cedric coughed and then heaved harshly. Oh, feeling yes, I think. I know this feeling. It's time. Yuki squeezed his hand. Daddy, no. You know now that the moment is here. He coughed and squeezed Yuki's hand. I'm afraid, he whispered hoarsely. Yuki whimpered as tears leaked from her eyes. It's okay, Daddy. You'll be fine when the Guardian takes you. You were a good man, a good father. Was I truly? Yuki smiled. Yes, you're a good man. But you don't know what I have done. Don't be silly. You haven't done anything, she insisted. Cedric smiled. But then maybe that's why I was a good man. The machine flatlined, and he relaxed and went limp. Yuki fell against her father's body and sobbed. After almost an hour of signing papers, Yuki stood outside the hospital waiting for Afa to pick her up when her phone finally rang. She picked it up quickly and spoke harshly. Now you call? A man's voice answered. I was in an important meeting. How's Dad? Dad? Oh, he's dead, Yuki said shortly. What? The voice on the other side sounded shocked. I said, Dad is dead. He died. He died. And it would have been nice if his only son might have canceled his fucking appointments. And actually, I don't know, showed up. But you know what? I guess that was too much for you to handle. You probably won't even come to the Guardian damn funeral. Hey, that's not fair, listen, Dash. No, I'm done. So done. I'm done with you. You stood me up at my wedding, and now this? Do whatever you want to, big brother. Because I want nothing to do with you. She chuckled bitterly. You know, even a damn imp who knew Father managed to show up. He even brought a gift. Yuki Dash. An imp showed our father more respect than his own son. Think about that, you prick. Yuki hung up the phone with anger, and what may have even been hatred in her heart. On night, Yuki wiped away a tear. Asshole. She sat up, now shouting, You're an asshole. I'm stranded here and you do nothing. Why do you hate your family so much? What did we ever do to you? She stood up and yanked her necklace up over her suit. She looked at the vial dangling from the silver chain, brushing over it with her fingertips. Easing the transition, huh? She picked up her radio and cursed. Are you fuckers even looking for me? What, is it too expensive to come to save me? Fuck you. She ranted wildly. I'm shouting at nothing, aren't I? Nothing. I'm shouting at nothing, aren't I? Nothing. The radio monitoring station relayed the end of the message. A controller logged the entry, shaking his head as he typed up the foul language. He handed it off to another technician for processing. Both of these men were small, squat creatures. One's skin was a tan hue, while the others bordered on yellow. Each had short impish horns. One imp picked up the phone. and spoke softly to a man on the other end. "Sir, I assure you she managed to, somehow, survive. Yes, she found a weapon we heard it discharge, but we heard more activity afterward. It wasn't used for its intended purpose. I just sent you the full report. Have you read the yes? I'm certain she said, ease the transition." "Of course, sir," those precise words. "Yes, sir." The imp hung up and looked at his colleague. "Our orders are keep ears on her. Make sure we can place a precise time of death. She can't last much longer." The other imp technician sighed. "Her crew is getting really restless." In the crowded conference room, harsh white fluorescent lights shone down on a black and white polished marble table. Black was the dominant color of the shiny slab of stone, with streaks of milky white stone twisting and weaving its way through, splashing the obsidian surface like swirls of cream through black tar. This table was a massively long and ostentatious thing, sprawling across the room with enough space to comfortably seat 50 individuals. Endless rows of posh black leather chairs were neatly arranged on each side, with 2 larger white leather chairs at the head of the table. All of these chairs were occupied by male Dei Angels in expensive dark-colored suits, along with small smattering of female angels in equally expensive power suits. Every attendee wore an identical gold pin on their lapel. All of the suits worn were clearly custom-tailored, brand new by top designers and flawless in appearance. However, the men and women wearing them were hardly without flaw. Of the many old and agitated faces that lined the table, the eldest and youngest of the men sat at each head. The oldest gentleman sat at the beginning of the table, closest to the door. His outline was flanked by the twin white marble pillars on either side of the closed door. A few looked at him expectantly, waiting for him to start the meeting, while others talked amongst themselves. His gray wings wilted behind him like flower petals in a vase of roses left out too many days. The feathers had grown sparse in his advanced age. Some were reduced to only a shaft with little or no fluff along the sides. His hair was equally thin on the top of his head and completely devoid of color. His skin bore wrinkles of the experience of many years. His eyes, brown and sunken, were framed by skin as smooth as an uncured slice of leather left to bake in the hot sun. His thin lips surrounded yellow teeth, and a thinning white mustache was barely noticeable against his pale skin. Under his nose ran a pair of plastic tubes connected to a single bit of plastic going into each nostril. An oxygen tank sat to his right, and he steadied himself with a gold-tipped cane on his left as he rose to his feet. A few minor arguments and animated discussions surged along the length of the table. When the voices reached a cacophony that was indistinguishable from speech, the elderly man huffed in disapproval. He moved his hand to grasp a large wooden cylinder in the shape of an hourglass. He rose the hourglass high in the air and smacked it hard against the sturdy marble table, drawing the attention of all the voices that were scattered everywhere just moments ago. The old man spoke, his voice booming loud across the room so that even the farthest person could hear him quite clearly. "If you are all quite finished with your childish bickering, perhaps we can use this precious time for our emergency meeting of the Order of the Scale, which is now officially called Order." All eyes focused on him, even that of Eric Jacob Sorjoy, the youngest man in the room, who sat opposite the elderly member. Next to Sorjoy sat a rather rotund Dei Angel with brown hair and dusty gray wings. He looked toward the elderly man, but leaned back in his chair, so he still had the ability to peer at Sorjoy with his peripheral vision. He was built more broadly than Sorjoy, heavier, stuffed into a suit, with a cigar sticking out of his lapel pocket. This man sitting next to Sorjoy was Albert Hoffman, CEO of Sorjoy's rival company, Dei Mining Incorporated. Sorjoy was aware of Hoffman's side-eye, but ignored him, giving his full attention to the speaker. The elderly gentleman conducting the meeting was Reginald Truman, the wealthiest individual in all of Dei, and by far the most powerful. As he stood before the membership still holding the hourglass firmly in his grasp, he commanded the council entirely, demonstrating that the only thing he was unable to dominate was clasped tightly in his fist. "We are here to speak of 2 very important circumstances. Our first order of business, as you all well know, is the fall of the asteroid miner onto Night," he announced. While his voice carried power and volume, it was clear that maintaining this action caused him considerable strain. The room erupted into a fervor of conversation once more. Truman's cylinder again slammed onto the marble table, shaking it beneath everyone's hands. "Order!" His voice thundered through the room, leaving the sounds of agonizing inhalations of breath. The council could sense the tension rippling off of Truman, and silence soon settled over the room. An angry voice spoke up from halfway down the table. How could such a thing occur? Why are our miners so close to the Nitin orbit in the first place? Sworjoy was about to stand and answer, but Hoffman, sensing his rival's intention, did so first. As Hoffman stood, a murmur rippled across the room. Because we have mined out all of our near-planetary minerals. Those resources are exhausted, completely depleted. Since we obviously cannot have our industry come to a grinding halt, we opted to expand operations to mine the asteroid fields closer to Night. Sworjoy, not to be outdone, also spoke up. Additionally, this has the added benefit of protecting Night from falling meteors. Another voice, a tall man in a police uniform of the highest command, stood. Gabriel Palma, commissioner of the Northern District, stood up and shouted, but not from falling miners. Hoffman's shit-eating grin was apparent as he replied, "I agree. It is sheer incompetence that a miner fell, and now we find ourselves in this emergency meeting. We have removed most of the safety equipment, at least on my mining ships." He shot a pointed look at Sworjoy. "But then again, it was not one of my ships that fell, for if one of mine had fallen, the miner would not have survived, and we would not be in this predicament." Sworjoy was having no more of this perceived slander and stood up to face Hoffman as the council watched, now with rapt attention. "That is a ridiculous assertion. My employees happen to be more educated, therefore more focused, and we all know they are more productive. This is why my company is historically more successful," he replied smugly as Hoffman rolled his eyes. Sworjoy continued his rebuttal. "As a more competent workforce, they are inclined to do inspections of their ships prior to launch. As they are not the bunch of buffoons that you employ, Brother Hoffman, I have to keep the bare minimums in place." He sat back down, looking at Truman, who stared back at him stone-faced. "Historically, indeed," his rival sneered. "Well, currently, Farnsworth Inc. is bleeding capital," Hoffman snarked. Sworjoy leaned back in his chair, his gaze now hardening on Hoffman. "For now," he hissed. The hourglass struck the table again. "Enough, Brother Sworjoy." Sworjoy quickly stood again. "Yes, Grand Patriarch? As this occurred on your watch, you shall be the one to resolve the situation, to the fullest of your ability." Truman narrowed his graying eyes on Sworjoy. "You will do so while strictly abiding by our bylaws and tenets," Truman barked. Sworjoy nodded and slightly bowed his head. "Of course, Grand Patriarch." Hoffman was taken aback at this turn of events. He looked at Truman in disbelief and sputtered, "Respectfully, Grand Patriarch, if I may, Brother Sworjoy clearly has an extreme conflict of interest here. I am best equipped to properly handle the situation." Truman's gaze did not leave Sworjoy. "It is that exact conflict that Brother Sworjoy now must overcome, Brother Hoffman. It is decided and not up for debate," he snapped. There were minor murmurs and whispers of dissent before Truman spoke again. "This will be the final trial that Brother Sworjoy will face to earn his father's seat, the hallowed seat that I only tentatively hold in the interim. When he is successful, he will take up the torch of Grand Patriarch." A reverent silence befell the council. Protect Night at all costs. The room recited the first tenet. Protect Night from Dei. Again the room repeated their chant. Conceal Night from Dei. Another verse, recited from memory. And above all else, ensure no one outside the Order of the Scale lives to bear witness of Night. The council chanted a final reprise of the last tenet. Then the entire room spoke loudly in unison. 1,000 feathers for a single scale. When the ritual reached its completion, Truman looked at Sworjoy gravely. "Ensure that you do not deviate, Brother Sworjoy, not even a little. Your appointment as your father's successor is contingent on the cleanup of the situation being perfectly executed." Sworjoy nodded. "Yes, Mr. Truman, I will ensure that I follow the Order's tenets to the letter." There was murmuring throughout the room. Truman nodded, satisfied. "Our previous patriarch would honor the decision you have made, son. Ensure that all your actions going forward continue to honor him. Sorejoy stood near the elevator, staring at the lighted indicator above the doors while waiting for them to open. Prior to the elevator's arrival, a tall Dei Angel that resembled Gabriel Palma caught up with him. He was a beast of a man compared to more average-sized Sorejoy. His black hair, greased tightly over the top of his head, did not quite match the even deeper pitch black of his large and powerful wings. "Mr. Sorejoy," he greeted. "Palma." Sorejoy said curtly, giving him a nod. Azrael Palma was the son of Police Commissioner Gabriel Palma and the current police chief of the Northern District, where Sorejoy currently resided. "Quite the workload you got fair yourself," he commented. "Indeed," Sorejoy said absent-mindedly. He was distracted by the stress of the burdensome and difficult task now upon him. The elevator doors chimed, opened, and both men strode in. Sorejoy stared up at the display as the doors closed. After a moment of silence, he began to vent a bit. "To add to my aggravation, my executive assistant just proved herself entirely incompetent. I'll need a new one shortly." Palma nodded. "Got a pretty one lined up? Always nice to have eye candy around the office, right?" Palma snickered and nudged Sorejoy with his elbow, waggling his eyebrows. Sorejoy's face remained stalwart. "I have no one yet. Unfortunately, my HR department only just began reviewing resumes. Trying to find someone well qualified and with a good head on her shoulders, willing to work it or under market value." A slight smile finally played across his face, and blonde. Palma's smile unexpectedly faded. He shifted on his feet a moment before speaking again. "Well, that's interesting actually. I may just call in a favor then. I have a request." Surprised, Sorejoy raised an eyebrow. "A favor? What?" "I have a referral I'd like you to hire for the position, with no questions asked. She can start immediately and she fits your criteria. In a way, I'm doing you a favor by bringing her to you." Sorejoy frowned, disconcerted. "Palma, this is not the situation to gamble favors. I need the position to be filled by someone extremely trustworthy and able to work under pressure." Palma nodded, his demeanor unusually serious. "Yes, Mr. Sorejoy. My referral is all that and more. My only stipulation is you skip the entire interview process. Keep her on for 3 months, and I promise you she'll prove her worth." Sorejoy sighed. "Very well then, give me her name and number, and inform her she'll be receiving a call. I'll tell HR that I'm hiring my own talent from outside the company. And you owe me now," he added. Palma's smile returned. "Her name is Cleopatra Cassandra Walters, and she has white hair." Sorejoy cracked a grin. "White?" He was pleased to hear it. The phone rang, its shrill tone cutting to the quiet, darkened room. A young woman's face was comfortably buried in a pink satin-covered pillow. Her long white hair lay wrapped neatly in a stocking that held it in place, preventing unsightly tangles or frizz. Her beautifully manicured hand reached clumsily for the ringing phone, feeling around in the dark. It was very early in the morning, too early for the phone to be interrupting her slumber. Her delicate fingers located the phone and brought it lazily to her ear. She grumbled sleepily into the small cell phone. "What?" Palma's voice boomed over the line. "You're going to get another call in 10 minutes. "How the fuck did you get this number?" The young woman growled. "I thought I made it pretty clear the last time. That was the last time I ever wanted to see you, no matter how much you've been paying me. Did I forget to mention that includes hearing from you too?" she snapped. Palma ignored her tirade. "You're going to get another call in 10 minutes, Cleo. They're going to tell you that you have a job at Farnsworth. If they ask, you're to tell them your resume is missing work time because of a family emergency that you had to deal with after school. Tell them you graduated. Doctor the resume however you want it needed, but they probably won't even ask to see a copy." The pale-haired beauty groaned. "A background check will show the truth pretty quick, Azrael." "No background check," he replied triumphantly. The young woman fell silent. "What is this for? What's your angle?" She sat up, white wings shifting in the moonlight. "Executive assistant. Starting salary 300 kilo a year. Clean money. No sex. No parading yourself around in an evening dress and heels either. It's legit work." The woman blinked to sleep from her stunning violet eyes. Okay, you have my attention. Yuki, feeling the futility of her predicament, tossed her radio across her shelter and wrapped her golden wings around herself in a hug. She hadn't slept on a real bed in weeks, and the sudden inclusion of gravity in the hard ground was depriving her of much-needed rest. Her water supply was running low, and her thirst was growing urgent. She had been holed up in her shelter for far too long, as she greatly feared to venture out due to the rippers, dragons, and countless other hazards in the alien world. Would she survive another trip to the lake? Her ship stuck out quite prominently, still likely floating where it had made its less than graceful crash land. Going back there seemed unwise, but without water, she could not survive much longer. The combination of the uncertainty, fear, and thirst was driving her mad. While she was doing her best to make do with the carved meat from the ripper she killed and the last remaining fruit, her stomach growled and complained about the tough protein-rich meat. To make matters worse, she was stricken yet again with what were now recurring stomach aches. I have to get out of here. I have to get some water. She rocked back and forth, groaning as her stomach pains redoubled. She heaved a sigh, a tear rolling down her cheek. This is it, isn't it? The sunshine slowly streamed in from the top of Yuki's shelter, and she looked up at the warm rays. The sun! It was the only thing constant in this strange place. It was still her son, the same one that shone a home. This small comfort did little to ease her troubles, as the pain in her stomach and throat was maddening. She shivered, despite the warm rays of her sun, as she rocked back and forth in a self-soothing motion. And then, like a whisper carried on the breeze, her father's words came to her. Ease the transition. Yuki pulled the necklace she wore up and looked at the small blue vial. Die of thirst, stomach virus, or die while tripping out on something that could easily be poison. Yuki closed her eyes tightly. My own terms, right? She tugged at the top of the vial, removing the wax covering with the small blade on her multi-tool. She gazed at the liquid as it hypnotically swirled around inside, the strange metal-like flakes moving about the liquid as if they had a mind of their own. She held it up to the light, blue fractals shimmering across her face. Sorry, Jeffrey. Mommy tried. Her stomach groaned and she grunted, quickly quaffing the liquid and swallowing it down. The first thing that hit her was an intense bitterness swirling over her tongue, followed by a sweetness that was almost completely overpowering. Yuki fell to her knees and wretched, though oddly nothing seemed to come out as she did so. She fell onto her side and coughed roughly, the pain in her stomach intensifying in a way she had never felt. Tears streamed from her eyes. That was a bad idea, Yuki thought. Don't drink the crap under the shelf. Oh, this is it, isn't it? Is this the end yet? Please, please tell me this is almost over. The pain abruptly stopped. Yuki opened her eyes and everything seemed silent and still. She stood up slowly, looking around her shelter. She felt her stomach, no longer feeling the strange pains and gurgling as she did before. She turned around, expecting to see her body lying beneath her, but saw nothing but the wall of her shelter. The shelter melted around her, swirling and undulating in a burst of vibrant colors. Yuki gasped as the wall remnants oozed down to the ground. The landscape of the forest reclaimed her surroundings. As she glanced upwards, the roof had vanished. A very strange, yet oddly familiar sensation began to pass through her in waves. From her head to her toes, her skin began to prickle. It was as if she was being drenched in scalding water. And Yuki couldn't help but take a sharp inhale, her wings spreading wide out of sheer reflex. Her heart was racing. Her wings began to flap on their own accord. Yuki's feet struggled as she found herself leaving the ground. Wait! Wait, I haven't tried to fly since I was a kid. I dash. Yuki's body surged with calm energy, and a shiver passed through her as the air passed over her feathers. Oh! Guardian, why haven't I tried to fly since I was a kid? She smiled, overjoyed, placing her feet together as she remembered doing in her youth, and promptly soared into the air, higher than physically possible. Yuki's heart was in her throat as she soared over the tree line, her eyes tearing up as she wondered why she had not tried to fly in so long. The pressure of work, of constantly training for long missions in a cramped spaceship. None required her wings, but still, the question finally came to her, and felt like an epiphany. How did I forget how to fly? Either way, I'm gonna have fun. Yuki gave a powerful, gleeful flap of her wings, soared even higher vertically, and gasped as the world around her turned to a blur. She was flying far faster than she should have been able to do so, and now Yuki was certain that this was a vision. She soared up into the sky, watching as the blue hue of the sky darkened and the black void of space rushed down to greet her like a long-lost friend. Yuki grinned with delight. Can I fly home? With another excited flap of her now magnificent wings, the stars turned into streaks in her vision, and she couldn't help but cry out in excitement as she barreled through the void and soon spotted the small amber orb of her home growing larger and larger. As she propelled toward her beloved Dei at an impossible speed, she finally pierced the atmosphere and smiled wide, tears streaking down her face as a familiar yellowish hue of the sky greeted her vision. She laughed wildly as she flew faster toward the ground, a wide smile on her face as she ducked and weaved along the roads, making her way into the dense city that she called home. Upon seeing her townhouse, Yuki could not resist doing a loop, landing in front of her home on one knee, a fist to the ground. She grinned to herself as she stood, flexing her hand. I always wanted to do that. She looked to the ground, chuckling as it seemed she had cracked the street from her impact. She looked up at the tense sky. Home. I'm home, she shouted gleefully. Yuki dashed up the steps of her home and shoved the door open. Afod, Jeffrey, Mommy's home. I'm alive and I'm back. However, upon opening the door, a bright white light blinded her. As her eyes adjusted, she found she was no longer at the threshold of her home. She didn't appear to be anywhere. The room was white, with no discernible corners or ceiling or even floor. Yuki looked behind her and saw an endless sea of white going behind her as well. As she turned forward, a towering Dei Angel sat on a comfortable-looking leather chair. The chair had white leather to match the room, and the man had on a white three-piece suit, even white leather shoes. His hair was blonde, his wings a bright white, almost blending in with the surroundings, and his eyes shined a bright violet. Ah, Yuki! He smiled wide. Welcome. Yuki frowned. Who are you? Yuki, I'm not surprised you don't recognize me, he chuckled. I'm your guardian, Lucifer. Of Night and Day, Chapter 4. I must confess, Lucifer regarded Yuki with a warm smile. You are not the one I was expecting. Yuki's eyes went wide as she regarded the massive angel who sat upon an otherwise unassuming, albeit giant, leather chair. His massive white wings framed his muscular frame, all while long blonde hair framed a flawlessly handsome face. Violet eyes glowed warmly but pulsed with power that, though unseen, filled Yuki with a sensation of awe. I'm not. She choked out, hesitant to approach the beautiful angel. She was startled by his sheer size, as well as his absolutely gorgeous countenance. If you weren't expecting me, then who were you expecting? She stammered slightly. Lucifer smiled at Yuki with adoration, his violet eyes shimmering. Someone who's no longer with you, my dear. Yuki's brow furrowed as thoughts of her father passed through her mind. Exactly, Lucifer stated, his eyes boring into Yuki's. Yuki felt her stomach drop as she wondered if the guardian before her could hear her thoughts. Why am I seeing you? I didn't expect to see the guardian here when I opened the door. Yuki stuttered. Lucifer grinned knowingly to Yuki. And I didn't expect your path to lead to where it did either. But such is the joy and wonder of my children's free will. Lucifer towered over her even as he sat. He gracefully motioned to a small gilded tea set on a table beside him. His soothing and empowered voice beckoned, Please sit, my daughter. Your cup is waiting. Help yourself. He watched her expectantly, already sipping from his own steaming cup. It appeared that Lucifer had indeed expected one guest. Afternoon tea for two was elegantly laid out on a table next to him, and next to that was an empty seat. This seat was much smaller than the one occupied by the refined and colossal guardian. Yuki studied the elaborate table with interest. In addition to the fancy tea set, there was also a mouth-watering triple-tier display of tiny sandwiches, scones, and cakes. She looked back to Lucifer in amazement. He was so majestic, so wonderful. Was she truly meant to sit and have tea with the guardian himself? Don't let the tea cool, dear. Lucifer said softly, but with a hint of urgency in his voice. Yuki obliged, happily settling into what proved to be an impossibly comfortable chair. She carefully poured a small amount of tea into her dainty porcelain cup. She clasped the small handle and brought it to her lips. It smelled divine. She was intensely aware of the Guardian's powerful gaze upon her. She took a tentative sip. As it touched her tongue, she instantly learned the true meaning of the word, heavenly. Such excellence was something Yuki knew she could never recreate by herself. Your mind creates whatever likes best, the Guardian said with knowing amusement. This flavor, you could never achieve it outside your mind, but in here, flawless. And you, my dear, you deserve a bit of luxury right now with everything you're currently enduring. Lucifer looked at her with sympathy. My mind? So this isn't real. Yuki sipped the delicious tea, gazing at her reflection on the surface of the warm liquid. Reality is merely a matter of perception, Lucifer chuckled. This moment is very real, but only to you and me. If I may ask, where's my son? My husband? Yuki inquired, suddenly flooded by thought of how much she missed her sweet Jeffrey. Perfectly safe, the Guardian reassured her. His response did not have his intended effect, and instead caused Yuki to grow rather frantic. Don't tell me that. What does that mean? Where are they? And if this is all in my head, am I safe? Yuki attempted to stand, but the Angel's huge white wing quickly moved to firmly stop her, encircling her in a warm embrace. You are safe. They are safe. Everyone you love is perfectly fine. Yuki, I promise. He looked at her earnestly, his violet eyes sincerely fixed on Yuki's bright blue ones. How can you be so certain? Yuki asked quietly, almost dreading the answer. Lucifer smiled affectionately and replied, because I am your father and your father's father and his father's father's father until the very beginning of your ancestral line. Yuki felt a grave shiver come over her, as at the bottom of her stomach had just fallen to the floor, and now she was free falling. Lucifer stood, slowly turning toward Yuki as he set his teacup down on the table. No fear, my child. Yuki swallowed hard, nodding, her eyes widening as she took in his shocking height. A subtle look of pride came over Lucifer's face as he regarded her. Yuki, so very strong and brave, my daughter, loyal and stubborn as the best of them. He lovingly placed his hand on Yuki's shoulder. Upon his touch, Yuki felt an intoxicating warmth spread over her, eliminating her tension. This gesture allowed her the courage to ask, did that blue stuff I drank kill me then? You are not dead. Lucifer chuckled. I suppose you preferred if I led with that, all things considered. Yuki laughed in relief. Am I going to make it out of this alive? Lucifer laughed with her and took Yuki's hand, sending more waves of pleasure and contentment shooting through her body and spirit. Come, we have much to discuss before we part ways. Yuki grimaced. Part ways? Where are you going, Lord Lucifer? Please don't leave me now. I need you. I'm stranded in Dash. You do not need my help. You are more than capable on your own. Lucifer chuckled as he cut her off. And no need for the Lord, my child. Guardian will do, or even Father if you prefer. And actually it is you who is leaving, not I. No, I can't leave his side. Yuki thought. Distraught, she looked at him sadly. I don't follow. Lucifer's smile faded slightly. No, you don't. Not like the others in your bloodline. Even then, not as I would have liked, but that your nature, isn't it? Devotion is optional for my children. He looked at her, his smile returning. My little Yuki, how I will miss you. But fret not, you are in the hands of my fathers now, and they will welcome you. He laughed. I did not think it was you they would one day welcome, to be honest. But that is the wonderment of my children's free will. Yuki looked ahead, trying to determine where he was leading her. Wonderment of free will? Lucifer chuckled. It is vexing and challenging, but oh so refreshing. You will soon learn why. But know this, your free will is unique to you. It allows you the freedom to act for your own interests, or, he beamed down to her, act in the interests of others. The choice will remain yours. She wasn't sure what the Guardian was talking about, but she did her best to follow. It was right about now she really wished she had paid more attention in church. They soon came upon a large stone well, a going-away present. He handed her a gold coin. Make a wish, but I warn you it will come true. He beamed, his face glowing. I promise it. Yuki frowned. I don't understand. Will I ever see my son and husband again? Lucifer kneeled down beside her, although he still had to look down at her to make eye contact. He replied simply but with empathy, "No, you will not, Yuki, and for that, I am so sorry." Yuki looked at the shiny gold coin. "Can I wish to know what is the meaning of life?" Lucifer hesitated a moment, and then began to laugh heartily. Yuki frowned in embarrassment. "Are we a joke to you?" "No, my child." Lucifer's laughter subsided. "But that would be a waste of your wish." "Why?" Yuki frowned, feeling like a small child. "Yuki," Lucifer began, "would it matter at all to you why you were here?" Yuki thought, looking around the void and then back to the wishing well. "I suppose... Well, no, but what is my purpose?" Lucifer smiled, gently stroking the top of her head. "Why, Yuki, are you asking me?" "That is a question only for you." Yuki felt a spark of understanding at this piece of wisdom, and considered it for a moment. "Okay, if I make a wish, you'll grant it?" "With all my power, so make it worthwhile." Lucifer grinned. "Then I want my son to be safe from harm. If I'm not there for him, I want him to be looked after and safe. I want him to have your protection." She tossed the coin into the well. Lucifer smiled at the well and turned to her. "You have my word, Yuki. I will always pay special attention to your son. You are certain that is all you desire?" Yuki smiled and looked at him oddly. "As long as it means he's alive and well." Lucifer smiled coyly. "Alive? I assure you, he will live a long and healthy life. But no one lives forever." "Don't you?" Yuki asked. Lucifer laughed. "A fair point. I will do my best to satisfy you, Yuki." He tapped the well. "Come now. I have a few parting words of wisdom before you go. But know this, you need not worry about your son." Yuki looked around, the white around them vanishing. Am I going into the darkness?" Lucifer shook his head, smiling. "No, dear, but you will be traversing the darkness of your own soul." He placed his hand on her chest. "No fear. Remember, Yuki, do not fear what you do not know. Embrace it." He held her shoulders tightly now, sinking down onto his haunches. It was as if something quite powerful was pulling them apart, and his grip was keeping her there just a moment longer. A deafening wind now encircled them both, the darkness swirling around the two of them. "And most importantly, live," he cried out. The well vanished. Yuki yelled back to him over the surging wind, hugging the guardian tightly. "I will, but please protect me." "You're in their hands now, my daughter," Lucifer called out, his grip on her beginning to fail. "Whose hands?" Yuki shouted desperately. "My father's," Lucifer shouted. "The guardian shall protect you. The Father, the Son, and the Holiest Spirit. Be with them, child." With that, she was ripped from her father's embrace. As Yuki felt herself falling, she heard her father's voice echoing over cacophony of wind and clattering of falling brick and stone of the now shattered well. "Live, Yuki, live well." Back in her uncomfortable shelter, Yuki gasped, spitting up a mixture of saliva and vomit, clearly expelled while she was unconscious. She groaned upon realizing where she was, placing her hand on her head. It was strange, though. Despite her situation, she somehow felt very rested. She recalled the vivid dream. It felt so real. She was flying, fast and high. She went home to find her family, but instead met an angel, a massive, kind, wise, and powerful angel, and he told her many things. Was he the guardian? The memories were vanishing faster than she could try to recall them, as dreams often do upon awakening. She recalled her father's voice. Now the only thing she clearly remembered. "Live! Yuki, live!" She spoke out loud, feeling the urge to answer. "I will, Daddy." She looked up, feeling a renewed surge of determination. Yuki's thirst was unbearable. Her water container was bone dry. She searched all around the campsite, but for the life of her, she could not find a single suitable water source. Her stomach grumbled angrily, and her throat was parched. The vomit found next to her upon her awakening had demonstrated in great detail that she had clearly lost everything she had eaten and drank. Why this made her feel worlds better, aside from her hunger and thirst, was bothersome. Did I eat something poisonous? She wondered if she misread her field guide. Yuki made the decision to return to her ship, admitting to herself that she had no choice. The lake had water she could at least boil to drink, and it was possible there was more she could salvage from the ship itself. She packed a bit of cooked ripper meat and made her way through the thick forest. If she was lucky, she might find a few store rations stashed in the ship as well. She trudged along on a hike out of the forest and back to the lake. This physical exertion was making her already empty stomach grumble and complain more. It didn't help matters that her body was still out of whack from that strange drug she had taken. To answer her stomach's complaining, she reached into her pack and took a chunk of meat, tearing into it and chewing it thoroughly. It was cold, it was dry, but it was food. As she traveled, she did as best she could attract whatever landmarks that she remembered from when she had dragged the parachutes into the woods. The last thing she needed was to get lost on her way back to her hideout. Finally, Yuki found herself at the forest edge. Out past the tree line was a familiar field of tall wild grass that soon gave way to the small sandy lakeshore. As she slowly made her way through the overgrown grass, she soon spotted her ship in the lake. She breathed a sigh of relief and took a couple more steps before drawing a small gasp and stopping dead in her tracks. Adrenaline coursed through her as she processed a terrifying sight dangling above and not very far away from her. A large, powerful-looking, blue-scaled leg was hanging from a hammock not too far from the shoreline. It was larger than the Ripper's leg, and its foot had twice the toes. Yuki frowned, slowly ducking into the grass as she reached for the field guide. She silently checked the Knitting Dragon entry. To her utter dismay, the foot matched the illustration perfectly. Vibrant blue scales glistened in the morning light. The 4 large toes were tipped with large black claws. Even the back of the huge paw had a dew claw protruding from a heel. As Yuki examined the leg in horror, she was struck by the unusual realization of why it was positioned in such a way. In the trees, she spotted a large brown sling-style leather hammock. The only indication that it was out of place in the green and brown tree branches was the brilliant color of the leg. Soon a large, equally colorful matching tail joined said leg, luckily compromising the otherwise well-camouflaged hammock's position. Terrified, Yuki did her best to halt her breathing. She pulled her wings tightly against her back, trying to make herself as small as possible. She grit her teeth and painstakingly began to back away, trying to stay hidden and out of the creature's line of sight. Caution transcended into panic as Yuki noticed a red knitting dragon's head now popping up from a previously unseen hammock on the same tree. There were 2 of them. The red dragon's had peeked over the edge, and its eyes blinked sleepily. The red one's hammock rustled and swung, and it let out a clicking noise. Had it seen her? Then Yuki saw the dangling blue leg flex and quickly withdraw back upward into its hammock. Suddenly, she heard growls coming from the 2 nearby trees. Peeking through the tall, thick grass cover, she looked to the second set of growling and saw the head of the other dragon. It looked angry, and Yuki didn't want to bother finding out why. Yuki sprinted as quickly as she could back into the forest to seek cover, desperately hoping they hadn't noticed her. Lazarus heard something in the distance that didn't sound like average rustling in the bushes. She leaned over her hammock, and to her surprise, she saw the Dei they were tracking. She was standing frozen in place, though, and she wondered why. She turned and saw Fezzik's foot and tail hanging down from his hammock. She groaned and let out a clicking noise to alert Fezzik. Fezzik stretched and yawned. "What?" he complained lazily. Lazarus whisper growled, trying to avoid further detection from the Dei. "Fez, you idiot. The Angel. It came back. Get up." Fezzik pulled his leg up. "Where? I don't see her," he said loudly. Lazarus rolled her eyes in frustration and growled, knowing their cover was surely blown. "Be quiet, you moron. She can hear us." Lazarus looked to where the Angel girl had just stood and growled more loudly upon seeing her fleeing back into the woods. "Great. You scared her off. Why is she so scared?" Fezzik growled in annoyance. as he jumped and landed heavily on the ground below them, so much so that the trees they had been sleeping in shook. Lazarus glided from the hammock and landed gracefully on the ground. She saw your big, ugly leg hanging out of the hammock and probably thought you were something that was going to eat her. Come on before she gets away. Fezzik grinned and began to give chase. Lazarus did the same, running as quickly as she could, her wings folded around herself for maximum speed as she quickly caught up to and surpassed Fezzik. Fezzik smiled, and in his excitement, he let out a mighty roar as they ran towards a forest. Yuki was already well into the forest when a horrifying roar blasted her eardrums. As if a fire had been lit under her, she bolted forward, faster than she had ever run before. Fight or flight instinct took hold, and flight took her as far away as she could go. Her heart hammered in her chest as she ran. In what must have only been minutes, she arrived at her shelter and quickly passed it by. She dropped her bag there as she dashed through, hoping to unburden herself and distract the dragons chasing her. Tears of fear filled her eyes as her heart throbbed in her throat. Her legs and arms burned from the strain of running for her life through the dense forest. Yuki's arm stung with sharp pain, and she stumbled as her shoulder clipped a tree branch. Determined to ignore the pain, she pushed forward, running as fast as she could. Luck was not on her side as a root caught her foot, and she careened forward, crashing straight into a tree. The mounting pain would have to wait, however, as she continued pushing forward, deeper into the woods. That was all she could think to do as she remembered the guidebook's warning. Run, run, run. Deeper into the woods, into denser woods where they wouldn't be able to find her from the air. Another tree root caught her foot, and she found herself flat on her face in a pile of leaves and ground debris. Yuki's tunnel vision gave way as she finally had a moment to breathe, and her ears perked up in hearing the sound of running water. She pushed herself up off the ground and glanced above to see a riverbank. "Oh, where were you before?" Yuki exclaimed while panting heavily, barely catching her breath as she voiced her frustration. A quick glance behind her showed that she might have lost her pursuers. Nevertheless, she dove into the water and swam upstream, giving quick bursts of speed with her wings as she swam, hoping that the dragons would assume she went downstream. If she couldn't outrun the creatures, she'd outsmart them. After all, she'd outsmarted that pack of rippers. Perhaps if they couldn't find her scent, they'd give up their hunt. Yuki hoped this was the case as she pushed herself until she couldn't swim any further. A large stump served as a decent temporary hiding spot. Yuki grabbed onto a slimy root, letting the river's current flow over her aching body. The cool water a welcome relief to her overtaxed muscles. The area stunk of decay and muck, but that was far preferable to being torn to shreds. Besides, she thought, the silver lining of such a rancid odor was that the smell might be overpowered enough to mask her scent. As she held on, she reached out into the flowing clean water and she cupped her free hand. She drank as quickly as she could, quenching her thirst before pulling herself closer to the stump. Lazarus was slowed by the density of the trees as she ran. She cursed as she occasionally got caught on a root or a tree branch. Pursuits on foot were not her strong suit, and even less so for Fezzik, who was a solid minute behind her at this point. She sniffed the air, and the scent of the angel grew stronger, at least the scene of what Lazarus thought was the angel, as she had never smelled anything like it before. She cast a glance behind her, and Fezzik was nowhere in sight. She rolled her eyes and turned to face forward. Lazarus spread her wings and brought herself to a complete halt. She flexed her claws out as she spotted the head of a swift plunderer looms out in front of her. She had run into these creatures many times. They hunted in packs of 3 and preyed upon hunter groups who had just made a kill. She roared in fear and jumped back, hitting her shoulder against a tree. Lazarus quickly realized with a closer look that it was only the head of a creature she knew as a swift plunderer. It was clearly decapitated. Strangely, its head was mounted on a large stick before what looked like a makeshift tent. As Lazarus inspected the area, she decided this was where the angel must have been making camp. The angel scent was everywhere, and as she sniffed, she turned to spot a strange bag tossed haphazardly on the ground. She rubbed her sore shoulder a bit as she continued to inspect the contents of the bag. With a sniff of the meat, her eyes went wide. Plunder meat? She's eating it. She looked to the decapitated head. Badass little angel. Lazarus examined a book written in a bizarre language she couldn't even begin to read. Ugh, I should have learned how to read, Dei. Fezzik finally caught up to her, panting hard. Not built for the chase, it would seem. His large chest heaved as he inhaled deeply through his nostrils and then exhaled hard through his mouth. His impressive muscles visibly bulged under a rather tight green leather vest, making it difficult to tell where the vest ended and his own blue leathery skin began. She won't understand us, he heaved. Taking in the masculine sight for a moment, Lazarus regained her composure. Look, she said slowly. This angel, she pointed to Plunderer's head. She killed it. The man's face was in shock. A Dei Angel killed a plunderer? Are you sure she didn't just find a dead one? Lazarus nodded and tossed a bit of meat at Fezzik. Yep, fresh plunder meat. Lazarus looked at the plunderer's head again. We'll have to find her soon. She got lucky with this plunderer. That luck won't last. Something else might get her. But if she's able to kill a plunderer, we need to be careful. She's not normal prey. She's smart. No more roaring, okay? She shot him a stern look, no matter how sexy it is. Fezzik rolled his eyes. She's a damn primitive. How smart can she be? Lazarus glared at him. Smart enough to slay a plunderer and brave enough to sleep on the ground. Or did you forget that it's because of those very plunderers that we have to sleep in the trees? She stood up, Yuki's bag in her hand. She knows we're after her, so she's probably hiding somewhere she thinks will hide her scent. I think there's a river nearby. Come on, let's make our way to it. See if we can pick up her scent there. Fezzik chuckled and walked towards Lazarus, picking the bag up to his nose and inhaling sharply. You have to admit, though, it was a pretty good roar. Lazarus felt her cheeks heat up and turned from Fezzik quickly. I've got her this way, she said as she ran toward the river. Fezzik grinned as he followed after her, even as she grew distant. His smile grew as he admired her beautiful tail switching back and forth, her powerful legs flexing as she gave chase. I love being the slower runner, he growled to himself, though unintentional. Her tail was held up high between her wings to keep her balance forward, giving Fezzik a clear view of her hips and thighs. Fezzik almost slammed into a tree due to his distracted admiration. Yuki's breathing slowed and she closed her eyes for a moment, her flight suit keeping her fairly dry and warm as she thought about her next move. She smacked herself in the head as she realized she had dropped the guidebook along with her bag. She couldn't risk going back for it. The dragons could be waiting for her to return her shelter if they lost her. She was likely stuck without the guidebook from now on. A sudden hiss in her ear startled Yuki. She turned quickly to see a large reptilian face peering at her, far too close for comfort. She pushed herself away from the shoreline and back into the stream, staring at the snake-like creature sticking its 3-foot-long neck from a knot of the stump. A pair of thin arms popped out from its sides and clutched at the rotting wood. Green scales with black stripes lined its long, serpentine body. Its forked tongue flicked out of its mouth as it curiously examined Yuki. Yuki swam downstream quickly to gain momentum and distance from this new threat. Now she had to outrun this strange creature, all while remembering that she was being pursued by knitting dragons. Why did every creature on this planet wish to devour her? Yuki swam past a familiar portion of the forest. It was where she had entered the river. She cursed at herself in realizing she was now downstream from where her scent would have ended. So much for hiding my scent. Yuki moved to the opposite riverbank and heaved herself up and out. A quick survey of her surroundings and a chance to slow her heart rate confirmed that nothing else was chasing her. I think I lost those dragons, she thought to herself as she peered over the river. Her panic and exertion had taken its toll. Burning pain in her chest, arms, shoulders, and legs was her body's desperate way of begging for a respite. This isn't good. She leaned her head back against the tree and groaned as her lungs seemed to burn. She couldn't stay there in the open, and so after the briefest of breaks, Yuki jogged off deeper still into the forest. Lazarus came to the river bank and frowned, sniffing. I knew it. She dove right in. She looked into the water, glancing down and upstream. I don't see her. She could have gone up or downstream. We may need to split up. Fezzik caught up with Lazarus, heaving as he did so. How about a quick breather? Lazarus growled. This is why you need to do more cardio. Fezzik knelt by the river bank and cupped his hands in the water, pulling them up to his muzzle and drinking heavily. After a moment, still gasping for air, he remarked, "She had to have gone downstream. The current is too strong. It'd be easier to swim downstream with this current, but upstream would give her a better hiding place, since she might have tried to outsmart us, thinking we would assume she took the easiest route. Splitting up is going to be our best bet." Just then a large serpent slithered through the water, showing its full length of over 3 meters. "Big guy," Fezzik said affectionately. "Yeah, he's a beauty. Too old to hunt though, but man, look at him." Fezzik bent his knees and beckoned to Creature. "Here, big guy, I won't hurt you." The serpent's instincts knew better than to trust one of the more capable hunters in its world, and kept going, slithering into its home in the dirt around the stump. "Hey!" Fezzik had an idea and looked at Lazarus, but she went downstream. Big guy might have scared her down the river, and it probably got curious and followed her down. It didn't look like it had anything in its mouth, so it definitely wasn't hunting. Plus it's too early to sunbathe, see? Its home is upstream from here. "You could be right," Lazarus said. She looked into the water. "You know," she said slyly, walking to Fezzik and placing her hands on his chest, a large toothy grin on her face. "If your muscles are so sore from running, you should cool off." She gave him a firm shove, laughing as he tumbled into the river. Fezzik gasped as he breached the surface, growling at Lazarus. Lazarus growled back, licking her lips as she happily examined her now-soaked hunting partner. Fezzik crossed his arms. "As much as I would love to make love in this river, we have to find that angel, or all this effort would have been for nothing." Lazarus humped and leaped over the river. Fezzik grumbled as he pulled himself out of the water. "I swear, you women are always ready for sex." Lazarus snickered. "Got a problem with that?" Fezzik rolled his eyes and did his best to catch up with Lazarus' fresh head start. Yuki needed to find someplace to hide, someplace where her scent would be masked or somehow hidden. As she put some distance between herself and the river, she continued into very dense, darker woods. When the brush seemed to reach its absolute densest, a small clearing emerged. The clearing was still shaded by the heavy canopy of trees, but was devoid of any movement impeding brush. As she took a moment to catch her breath, pain racked her body. She screamed out in shock as a sharp stabbing pain struck her hand. She looked to her hand to see some kind of horrific worm that was attached to her wrist. Worse yet, it had bitten right through her suit. She grabbed the worm-like creature that was attached to her hand and pulled it off with a painful gasp. Her hand was bleeding in a round bite mark. The worm had been sucking her blood. It writhed and wriggled in her hand as a circular set of sharp teeth, like spines, flexed and gaped in the air. She threw it to the ground and stomped on it in disgust. The worm popped as she squashed it, a small amount of blood oozing out of its ruptured yellow flesh. A wave of dizziness caught her off guard. She staggered to a nearby rock and shook her head to regain her composure. "Oh no, please don't be venomous." She looked at the strange creatures that wriggled on the ground and cringed. They were clearly seeking out something to feed on. She reached for her missing handbook out of instinct and found her hand was already numb. That's not a good sign. She scrambled away from the clearing. She had to get as far away from the dragons as she could. There was no way she'd end up as their breakfast. Fezzik and Lazarus had taken a brief break, held up by the thickening brush. Fezzik squeezed out his vest, grumbling. "Of all the times for your little cravings," he said, wringing his shirt out. Lazarus smiled seductively. "Hormones, my mate. I blame all the running. Seeing you out of breath like that," she purred. "It's your own fault. Muscle straining against that vest of yours." Lazarus licked her lips. "Makes a girl hungry." He let out one loud H.A. at her as he tirelessly dried his vest. "Let's hope the angel hasn't gained any ground due to your antics." Lazarus nodded slowly, her eyes on his bare chest, not paying his words much attention. Fezzik rolled his eyes and put on his vest, glaring at her. "What did I just say?" Lazarus' cheeks blushed. "Oh, she coughed. "Let me guess. Blaming the hormones?" Fezzik chuckled. "What do you do anyway?" She smiled warmly at him. "I'll be out of work for the next 3 weeks laying that egg for you, so you'd better work double for me." Fezzik nodded happily and beamed at her, While we name him? Or her? She laughed. It's not even laid yet and you want to name it, huh? She smiled and stood up. She slipped her now-dried pants back on and looked at him, remembering her original purpose. Okay, let's get back to this hunt. She's probably stopped running by now and is trying to hide out. She must be exhausted and scared. Why is she so afraid? Lazarus shrugged. Well, she's probably never been a knight before. Probably a real shocker. Dei Angels don't have any natural predators. Not to mention, she shivered. Your vocal performance? Fezzik smiled bashfully before he could say anything else. Yuki's scream of fear echoed faintly. For an average person, this sound may have gone wholly unnoticed, but to Fezzik and Lazarus' attuned hunter's ears, it was quite clear. Come on, I think she's in trouble. Yuki had run what felt like several kilometers before her arm had lost all feeling and accidentally hit into her stomach, winding her. She lay splayed against the cliff face, panting and trying to regain her composure. I have to get a grip. It's just my arm. It's just numb. She slowly stood up, finding it harder to move her right leg. Just my arm. Yuki lied to herself. She found herself near a smaller stream, and her lessening mobility was narrowing her options. She collected all the debris she could and gathered it together to form what looked to be a large pile of fallen branches next to an adjacent tree. She then moved to the stream and took off her suit, leaving her in her undergarments, and stuffed the suit full of leaves and dirt, placing it behind the cliff face from the direction she ran. She knew the hunters would follow her trail, so she made it seem as if she had passed out against the cliff. A quick dip into the water, and a vain attempt to clean her wound was next. Still numb, still bleeding. She frowned and continued on with the next phase of her plan. With all the mud she could find, she caked herself with it, finishing the task just as her leg went completely numb and limp. She dragged herself behind her cover and shivered there, the cold mud sapping her body heat. Pure fear gripped her. She had no choice but to hide. She knew the spot wasn't the best, but she was out of options. She could only hope the dragons would find her suit, tear it to pieces, and leave. Her wings' feathers ruffled, and she tried to smooth them down, keeping her wings against the tree behind her. She knew it was a terrible plan. She knew, deep down, that there was no way that the dragons wouldn't find her. At this point, she just hoped to delay the inevitable. She swallowed hard, and silently began to pray to Lucifer as hard as she could, despite being unable to move half her body. She could barely keep herself from violently shivering. Lazarus stopped as she spotted the same clearing Yuki had arrived at. Fezzik sniffed. She was here. Lazarus began to investigate when the twitching, worm-like creature Yuki had stomped on caught her attention. Is that a numb leech? Those are rare. Fezzik took a step back. You think she was bitten by it? Lazarus knelt by it and sniffed. That's her blood. She turned to Fezzik. Put it in your bag. What? He cried. I'm not touching that thing. You pick it up. I'm pregnant. Lazarus defended. And we need to show the doctors what bit her if she is going to live. They'll need to find the right anti-venom. She stood up and backed away from the leech as Fezzik scooped it up with a tentative claw. If she's been bitten, she's not going to make it very far. Her life is in danger. Fezzik nodded seriously. Right, so? We need to be rough with her. Knock her out if we have to. Pin her down. Tie her up. Whatever we need to do. She probably doesn't even know how much danger she's in right now. They rushed off, following the footsteps. As they did, Lazarus' face of worry seemed to grow. Her footprints are getting harder to track, and they're showing she's slowing down. Maybe that means we're getting closer? She sighed. Fezzik, if she's slowing down, she's leaving hard to find footprints. She might be doing it on purpose. The pair came upon the small stream. Lazarus stopped Fezzik fast in his tracks and covered his mouth, pointed to a familiar-smelling leg and boots. She jumped into the air and landed over the form of the angel. It's okay. I have... Wait. Fezzik frowned. What? He looked at the decoy, tilting his head to the side in confusion. Did she turn to dirt? Lazarus gave Fezzik a stern gaze. Fezzik shrugged. Well, where is she then? Why is she going to such great lengths to hide from us? I told you. She doesn't know how badly poisoned she is. Lazarus yelled, frustrated. Yuki heard the hunting party and quieted her breathing even more so than before. She took very slow, shallow breaths and did not move a single muscle as she heard the leaves and twigs snapping near the stream. She closed her eyes and pictured herself in a full-body cast. Unable to move, she heard the creatures growling and hissing at each other. She heard the female first, her growls higher pitched than the roar she had heard earlier. Yuki squeezed her eyes shut even tighter. ZH-BSDR. YSHLY RG, the female growled. The male's voice came next. MH? Ham PNTHLKLVK. There was a brief silence before the male's gruff growls echoed past Yuki's ears. VBKNA Haya, MDV Haya, MTKVNT, LHSDYR Maten. The female's voice now caught on a tone of anger as Yuki hears the next series of growls and hisses. MDLK, Haya La Emberl QSHH. Yuki now couldn't feel her entire right side, and her breathing was getting hard controlled. Suddenly, through her eyelids, she saw a shadow cast on her hiding place. No, her mind silently called out to her. Run, her mind then repeated, but her common sense beat it back. No. Finally, a low growl filled her with dread, enough so that she took a sharp breath, which was enough to signal her pursuer that she was there. A pair of clawed hands thrust themselves into the fabricated brush and parted it quickly, as if it were a pair of French doors. The red dragon bent down. Her wings flared, her legs parted wide and low and her tail high in the air. IH, SVP Sadie Ave. Her mouth was open wide as she growled out what seemed to be a low roar in Yuki's face, a wide, toothy grin and look of satisfaction on the dragon's lizard-like maw. There was no doubt in Yuki's mind that she would die, and the only thing she could do soon overrode every rational and reactionary thought in her mind. She screamed in pure and true terror, a specific terror, only experienced by one who knows they are drawing their final breath before a violent and untimely death. Her terrorized scream shook her body and soul to the core. Her fear overtook everything, and as if to merely avoid the pain of being gutted and then eaten, her body's overreaction caused her to faint.